Howdy folks, welcome to version 2 of my Network Plus practice questions. Now in case you're not sure, these questions were custom made with the N10-009 exam in mind. But they will however also work for the other versions of Network Plus exam as well, since the principles remain the same. In case you're wondering if these are the actual questions from the exam, no they are not. These do however test you on the same skills and they will measure you against the same objectives. If you don't feel comfortable with all the topics and concepts in this video, please do not go and write the exam. Rather hold back a little bit and go and study some more. If you're struggling with your studies, I'd suggest starting with the topics you feel uncomfortable with. Alternatively, you can also go check out the channel's Discord server, which you'll find in the video description down below. It's literally going to be way at the bottom of the video description, the link for the server. If this is your first time on my channel, or if you have not seen version 1 yet of this video, please also go check out version 1 of this video, which consists of 70 practice questions. It does not really matter in which order you watch these practice questions videos of mine, as long as you just go and cover as many of them as possible. End of the day, the more you do, the better. Alrighty folks, before we start, if you haven't done it already, give this video a like so I can help more people out there with free study material. And if you'd like to know when more of my stuff goes live, maybe consider subscribing and joining the family. Okay, I think that's enough blah blah. Let's get on with the first question. Question 1. You have just been hired by BurningIceTech to upgrade the company's network infrastructure. The company's current network is 10 megabits per second Ethernet running on a category 5 twisted pair cable. So at the moment, this company of mine has got normal Cat5 cable, that's very old cable guys, and it's running at a measly 10 megabits per second. There are 110 computers on the network, all of which have 10, 100 and 1000 multi-speed network interface adapters. Users are complaining that the network is too slow. BurningIceTech wants to upgrade to the fastest Ethernet standard possible using the existing cabling. Which of the following should you implement? Alright guys, so if you read this question slowly, you'll see I'm giving you guys a couple of tips there. There's a little hidden information there. For example, I mentioned that all 110 of these computers have got cards that can accept 10, 100 and 1000 megabits per second. So they can go up to 1000 megabits per second. At the moment, this network is running at a measly 10 megabits per second. So one thing we know already is all the network cards of all the computers can indeed handle a faster speed. What cable are we using in this network? Cat5. So the full name would be category 5, but we just refer to it as normal good old-fashioned Cat5. We don't really use that anymore, but that's besides the point. This is to test you guys on certain objectives in the exam. So what I'm asking you guys actually in this question is if you know what the maximum speed is that Cat5 cable can handle. So in other words, do you know what the code is for Cat5 cable? So one of the things you guys are going to be expected to know in the exam is you need to know the code names for all of these network cables, all the Ethernet standards. If you're not sure, I've got a video out specifically just for that on my channel. It's called Ethernet Standards. Please go and check that out. So you need to, for example, know that Cat5 is the following code, and Cat6 is this code, and Cat7 is that code. You need to know the code names for each of these cables, and you need to know the maximum distances that each can handle, and the maximum speeds that each can handle. And obviously, as an extra, if you can know which one is immune to EMI and which one is not, that's just going to count in your favor. Alright, so looking at the 4 answer choices I've given you guys down below. If you look at the first one there, upgrade to 1000 base T. Now guys, that is a cable that can go up to 1 gigabit per second. Cat5, for those of you that don't know, can only go up to a maximum of 100 megabits per second. Can only go up to a maximum of 100 megabits per second. You cannot go faster than that. So we know it's a maximum of 100 megabits per second. So what is the code name for that though, for normal Cat5? It is not the 1000 base T. That is a network cable, but that's a cable that's much faster. It's not your normal Cat5. Looking at answer B there, 100 base FX. So that is indeed a 100 megabit cable, but it's not a normal network cable. In other words, a normal LAN cable. No, that is fiber cable, guys. 100 base FX is fiber cable. It's very slow fiber cable, probably like the slowest one you can get. It's fiber cable that uses lasers. And if you look at answer C, that, guys, is also fiber cable. Also only a maximum speed of 100 megabits per second. However, that one uses optical light. So the difference between FX and SX is FX can normally go a much further distance because it uses lasers. Where SX uses optical light, it's a cheaper version, it's an entry-level one if you want to call it that. So the distance is not as good, but the speed is exactly the same. So if you're on a tight budget, SX might be the one for you. If the budget is not that tight, I would suggest you go with FX. All around, I would actually not suggest you go with either one of these because what's the point of getting fiber when it's the same speed as a normal network cable? The last one there, folks, answer D is indeed our answer here. 100 base T is the code name for Cat5. Now, Cat5's maximum speed, as we know, is 100 megabits per second, and the code name for that Cat5 cable is 100 base T. I'm going to say it again, guys. Please go and familiarize yourself with all the code names for all the cables. The 4 I've listed here for you guys today is not the only ones you need to know. There's quite a few, and you'll find them in my video that's called Ethernet Standards. Moving on to question 2. Which of the following addresses is an example of a PIPA? Now, I've had a lot of guys laugh about the way I pronounce Apipa, but you've got to keep in mind, first of all, I'm not English. That's not my first language, and I'm not from America. So we've got different ways of pronouncing it. As long as you guys know what Apipa is. Now, for those of you that don't know what Apipa is, maybe you did not watch that video on my channel, it is when a machine is unable to obtain an IP address. So if your device has been set to dynamic, which means it does not have an IP address, as soon as it connects to a company's network, it's going to request an IP address. And it's going to get one automatically, completely randomly, from something called the DHCP. Now, when that device is unable to get an IP address from the DHCP, this can be for any reason. Maybe the cable is unplugged, maybe the Wi-Fi signal is too weak, maybe, the signal... Maybe the DHCP ran out of IP addresses. Yes, that can actually happen, guys. There could be many reasons for it. The point here is, when this device in question is unable to get an IP address, we call that a PIPA. Now, what does it look like? So if you go into something like a laptop or a desktop, for instance, and you go into, let's say, command prompt, and you go and type an ipconfig to view your IP address, you're going to see a certain IP address. What is that IP address? Is it answer A? No, guys. That is an actual IP address. It's normally seen as class C by default, and it's generally seen as a private IP address. So a private IP address, that's something you would have inside your home or your office environment. And a public IP address is something you'll have outside your home or your office environment when you go onto the internet. Now, when it comes to private IPs, you get class A, B, and C. Those are the main ones. And when you see something start of 192.168.0, that by default is seen as class C. It's not set in stone. At the end of the day, it's going to be determined by your subnet mask. But by default, that is seen as class C. And by default, the exam, CompTIA's exam, sees that as class C as well. So answer A is completely out. That is a private IP. It's a class C IP by default, but it's not an Apipa IP address. Answer B. That, folks, is a loopback IP address. That is used to test your own TCP IP stack, and it's to go and test your network card to see if it's working and all that. So if you suspect your own network cards or that of your client or user is faulty, that is an IP address you can go and use. You're going to go and send 4 packets of data. It's going to basically go in a loop. It's going to go back to your own network card. And what you want to see here is 4 replies, obviously, which indicates that your own network card is working and your own TCP IP stack is A-OK. If you don't get 4 replies, which is very unlikely, then you know something is wrong. So that's a loopback IP. It's the only one that exists. The only other way you can achieve loopback is to go and ping your own IP address. Answer C, folks, is indeed the answer we're looking for. That is Apipa. Apipa IP addresses will always start 169.254. You can ignore what the last 2 octets normally says. In this case, it's 16.7. You can ignore that. We only pay attention to the first two octets. If the first two octets is 169.254, that, folks, is an APIPA IP address. It means you or this device does not have an IP address. And it's up to you to go and figure out why that might be. So that's our answer here today. Looking at answer D there, guys, that is also a private IP address, and by default that will be seen as Class B. A Class B IP address, which is much bigger than a Class C, normally starts with 172.16.something.something. So it obviously has way more available IP addresses than Class C. Class C has about 256 IP addresses, of which 254 are usable, assuming, of course, using the full Class C. If you look into Class B, which is answer D there, has approximately 16,000 odd IP addresses, which is way more than Class C. And of course, if we had Class A, which is not listed on this list today, that would have approximately 16 million odd IP addresses. Not something we see often, but yes, it's that many. So the answer remains C, folks. Question 3. Which of the following is the default port number for Hypertext Transfer Protocol, better known as HTTP for short, which is used for web browsing? Alright, so HTTP, guys, is something you would normally see in your web browsers. So if you've ever opened your web browser and you paid attention to the address bar, you would notice that most websites start with HTTP, and then it's going to be followed by www blah blah blah. So which of the following port numbers down below, there they are, guys, I'm giving you guys 4 random port numbers, which of these 4 is associated with HTTP? Is it port 23? No, that is Telnet. If you don't know what Telnet is, that's to remote connect to something, not with a graphical interface though. We would normally do this with a console of sorts. So the most common tool we'll use for that is normally something called PuTTY. It's obviously not limited to this tool, but normally you would use something like PuTTY. You can alternatively go and use command prompt and things like that as well. So you'll use that. You're going to type in the command telnet. You type in the device in question's IP address, and you are going to telnet to that device. It's normally going to be something like a remote router someplace, someplace online. And you're going to telnet to the device. It's going to ask you for a username and a password to that device. And via command line interface, you'll be able to control that device. And like I said, it's normally going to be a router. So you need to know the commands of that interface as well. So if you're connecting to a Cisco router, you need to be familiar with Cisco commands. If you are, for instance, connecting to an HP router, you need to be familiar with HP commands. So it's not as easy as it sounds. Port 25, folks, is used for SMTP. That is basically the old school way of sending emails. It's a well-known port number. All of these are well-known port numbers, which are also called common port numbers. So SMTP, yes, we still use it till this day for sending email, but it's not as popular as it used to be. Nowadays, we'll use Office 365, Gmail, Outlook, and there's obviously many other well-known email services, but their port numbers are not 25. They've got their own port numbers. Looking at answer C, 80. Yes, that indeed is the port number for HTTP. HTTP, for those of you who don't know, actually has 2 port numbers. It's 80, that's the one, and the other one is 8080. You can think of that as the back door. So if you're up to some sort of shenanigans online, 8080 is most likely the one you're going to be using. And then the last one there, folks, 443. It's also web browsing, but it's not HTTP. That last one is HTTPS. So port 443 is for encrypted web browsing, which we just call HTTPS. So if we want to do HTTPS, if that's the port you want to allow or block, it's going to be 443. If it's normal HTTP, you're probably going to go and allow or block the port number 80. Moving on to question 4. Which of the following devices broadcasts out of all its port numbers? Now, if you guys did your Network Plus course, or if you read your manual, you would know which device this is. It's actually referred to as a dumb device. That's not just me saying that. It's an actual term we use. We call this a dumb device. Because what it does is, if me and you are connected to the same device, and let's say there's a couple of other devices connected to the same device, if I send you something specifically, this device will send that something that's meant for you out of all its ports. And everybody's going to see it and everybody's going to get it. So there's no real privacy here. So this device, is it a router? No, guys. A router's purpose is to do exactly what the name says, to route you. It routes traffic across the internet. It gets you from one place to another place online, in a nutshell. It uses IP addresses to make its forwarding decisions. A switch, yes, that is something we are all connected to. It does allow us to share information, but a switch does not broadcast out of all of its ports. So if me and you are connected to the same switch, and maybe there's a couple of other machines that's connected to the same switch, the switch will only send the information that I send to you just to you. It's not going to go to any other people. A switch makes its forwarding decisions based on MAC addresses. The answer C we've got there, a hub. Yes, that is the answer. Now, I feel very frustrated by this question I've just made for you guys because this topic is covered in the A Plus course, it's covered in the N Plus course, and it's asked about in both the A Plus and N Plus exam. Yet, it's not something we use. So normally if something like this is something we don't use anymore, you would find they would normally go and remove it from the course, and they'll go and remove it from the exam. Now, this is still in the courses, and it's still in the exams, yet nobody really uses this anymore. It's almost extinct. It's legacy technology. So I don't see the point in why this is in the courses, but since I know it's in the exam, the topic of hub, I'm obligated to ask you about this. I want to make sure you guys understand that a hub broadcasts out of all of its ports. We call it a dumb device. So if me and you and a bunch of oaks are connected to the same hub, and I send you something like my salary slip, then everybody's going to get that salary slip of mine. There's no privacy. So the answer is and remains C here, folks. A bridge is something we don't see often, well, a little bit less these days. It's basically used to connect one network to another network, which is why we call it a bridge. It's going to act like a bridge. So if you want to connect to another network, you're going to have to go through that bridge. Question 5. Which of the following devices is also often used as a multi-port repeater? Alright, so before we go into that topic, you need to know what a repeater is, obviously. So a repeater, guys, is something we'll use to go and either rebroadcast a wireless signal, or it's something that we'll go and use to go and rebroadcast a cable of sorts. So if you have something like a good old-fashioned LAN cable, normally they can only go up to a maximum of 100 meters if we're using the metric system. After approximately 100 meters, that signal is going to get so weak in the cable that, well, nothing's going to happen on the other side. So you need to try and ideally keep it to about 80 to 90 meters realistically. And after that, you need to repeat the signal. You need to plug that network cable into a device called a repeater, and then you plug another cable into the other side of that repeater, and it's just going to go and kick the can further down the road. You can imagine this as pushing a trolley down an aisle, and in the beginning it's going to have lots of momentum, it's going to be nice and fast, and then eventually you're going to see it's going to slow down and down and down. It's going to come to a halt. It's pretty much the same concept. So in the beginning, the signal is nice and strong. And the further it goes, the more it slows down and the weaker it gets. So we need to give it a little bit of a nudge. Now in real life, we don't actually use repeaters that much. I mean, you get them. They're out there and they are being used, but not that much. Normally, realistically, in a real life environment, we use switches as if they are repeaters. Just giving you guys the answer now, didn't I? So in a proper company environment, you'll probably find they've got lots of switches all over the building. And if a cable looks like it's not going to make its destination, let's say the destination is like 200 meters away, you'll just go and plug it into another switch, and you'll plug another second cable into that switch and just kick the can down further down the road. So yeah, the answer is C. It's not A. A is to connect two different networks to one another. It's not to go and boost the signal. PoE. That is to send power down an Ethernet cable or into an Ethernet cable, but it's not to boost the signal per se. It's just to send electricity into that cable so that you or the user can power up another device on the end of that cable. So if you've got something like a VoIP phone or an access point, and that VoIP phone or access point is in a location where you don't have power, the Ethernet cable is actually a possible solution. Because normally there's going to be a network cable there, so all you need to do is just send the power that it needs via the network cable. So PoE is a special kind of switch you get. You get special kinds of switches that says PoE on the front, and you get actual small little PoE devices. It fits like in the palm of your hand, but it can only handle one cable. At the end of the day, the concept is still just to send power into a cable. The last answer we had there, answer D, router, well, we know what that is. That's to route your traffic across the internet. Question 6. please identify the tool shown in the image. Alright guys, so there's an image for you guys. So that is the tool. It is definitely something you guys are going to encounter somewhere in your IT career. Unfortunately, not all technicians and engineers have this tool. It's not that expensive, but if you're working for a company, there is a chance that your company might not buy you all the tools you need. It's a very frustrating experience. They expect you to do certain things, but they don't always give you the tools. If this has ever happened to you guys, please comment down below and let me know what happened to you. It's happened to me more times than I can count, where my boss or my company that I used to work for, they'll say, can you please go to the following company and do the following? And when I get there, I realize, oh, I need this tool, oh, I need that tool, but my company doesn't give me these tools. They say, nope, you must make a plan. So that's very annoying when that happens. They expect me to do a job, but they don't give me the tools to do this job. So has this ever happened to any of you guys? If it has, please let me know in the comment section down below. What's the story? Curious to see. We call them war stories, so hopefully it doesn't still happen to you guys. So looking at the image here, hopefully you guys have this tool. Is that a crimper? No, guys. A crimper is a tool you'll go and use normally to go and crimp an RJ45 jack onto a network cable like Cat5, Cat5e, Cat6, Cat6a, and so on. So that's what we generally use a crimper for, but they can also be used to crimp an RJ11 jack onto a telephone cable. We don't really use that anymore because nobody uses telephone cables. People nowadays just call via VoIP. Is it answer B? A punch down tool. Yes, it indeed is a punch down tool, guys. So if you have a wall box, for instance, and you need to get your network cable into that wall box, a punch down tool is what you'll use to go get the 8 individual wires into the special slots. So the little thing you see there in the front, that's what you go and use to press the 8 wires individually, one by one, into the little sleeves, the little slots. And as it presses down, it actually cuts off the excess wire as well, so it keeps it quite neat. Now, if you find yourself in a pickle where you don't have this tool, you can actually also go and use a very small flat screwdriver. It's not going to cut off the excess wire though, but that's not the end of the world. You can actually just go and close the little cover of the wall box and you're not going to see the excess wire anyway, so it actually makes no difference. The only time you're going to see the excess wire is if you go and open the wall box, and nobody's going to do that. Once it's been punched down and you close the box, it's not going to be needed for you to go and ever open that wall box again. So yes, you can use a small little flat screwdriver as a substitute. Does not work as good as the original tool, but it'll get the job done. Answer C, we know it's not answer C or D because I already told you the answer is B. Wire stripper. Wire stripper is something you guys would have seen in my previous practice questions in version 1. So if you guys did version 1, there's a picture of a wire stripper in that video of mine. It's generally something we'll use as electricians. So you guys probably not going to be using that since we're not electricians, but if you happen to be an electrician, chances are you probably have one of those in your toolbox. It's used to cut off wire and expose the copper. So if you want to go and work with electrical wire, that's going to cut off the plastic coating of the copper, and it allows you to expose the copper and work with the copper. Generally, that's what it's used for. It's probably not the only thing. The last answer, tone generator, also known as a toner probe. It's got more than one name. So a tone generator is something that you or a technician would go and hook up to one side of a cable, and it generates a tone in the cable. At first, you're not going to hear it, and it's got like a two-part tool. You know, one end of the tool you go and connect to the one end of a cable, and the other end of the tool looks like a little wand. It looks almost very similar to this little punch-down tool we see in the picture in front of us. And the idea is you hold that little wand near the cable, and as soon as you hold it near the cable, it generates a tone. It allows you to trace this cable inside a wall, inside the ceiling, or just in general when you've got many cables together and you're not sure which one is which. So if you have, for instance, a network cable in someone's office, and you see it going into the wall, and you know it's going to go into the ceiling, but you're not sure where in the wall it's going and where in the ceiling, you can use this tone generator, connect it to the cable, and then you hold this wand near the wall, and you can literally hear where the cable is. It's going to generate a tone when your wand is near the cable. And then eventually, when this cable happens to come out the other end, you know, probably in a network cabinet or something where there's probably lots of cables, you might not know which cable it is. And generally, we don't just want to go and yank out random cables until we find it, because that can cause damage. So you want to know which cable it is right off the bat. And to do that, you just have to hold your little wand near the cable, and if you get to the correct cable, it's going to generate a code. Question 7. Which of the following connectors is not a fiber optic cable connector. Now guys, you're going to notice that in this question round of mine, version 2, as well as version 1, I'm going to ask you a lot about cables. The different kinds of cables you get, the connectors associated with these cables, their speeds, their benefits and their drawbacks. For example, which ones are immune to EMI and which ones are not. That is because it's very important that you know that for the exam. The same can be said about wireless standards. So wireless standards, you need to know the different kinds you get, their maximum speeds, their benefits, their drawbacks, their usages, all that kind of stuff. So for each of those two I've just mentioned, there's a dedicated video on my channel. There's a video called Ethernet Standards, and there's also a video called Wireless Standards. So if I'm not mistaken, I think Ethernet Standards is lesson 16. It's either lesson 15 or lesson 16. I think it's lesson 16. I stand to be corrected. So just go check on my channel under the N10-009 playlist and go look for lesson, I think it's 16. It says Ethernet Standards. If you need to know more about that, if you're very uncomfortable with that topic, go check out that video. If you're uncomfortable with wireless standards, that will be lesson 17 in that playlist. Lesson 17 will be about wireless standards. Now, looking at the connectors in front of us, guys, which one is not fiber? Is it A? No, A is indeed a fiber connector. Fiber cables, guys, has got many connectors. 3 of these connectors in front of us are fiber. One of them is not. And believe it or not, the 3 fiber connectors in front of us are not the only ones. There's many other ones that's not even listed here right now. So A is indeed fiber, guys. B and C, that is not fiber. That is the answer here. B and C is something we'll use for coaxial cable, which is an old legacy cable. Answer C, that is fiber. Answer D is fiber. And I mean, you even get FC, which I don't see here, and there's quite a few other ones as well. So the answer here is B, guys. That's for coaxial. Question 8. You have been tasked to install a new server in the data center of BurningIceTech. You are concerned that the amount of traffic generated will exceed 1 gigabit. Higher throughput NICs are not available for this installation. So NICs, guys, is network interface card. I'm writing only abbreviation there because that's most likely what they'll do in the exam. So please familiarize yourself with all the abbreviations. So if you've got yourself a manual or something, I would say go click next, or go, open all the pages, go through all the pages, and any abbreviation you see or find in your manual or whatever resource you've got, make a note of it. If it's something you know, and you know what it stands for and what it means, then it's fine. You can probably skip it. So if you know what NIC means, if you know NIC, for example, is Network Interface Card, and you know what it does, that's fine. Skip it. You don't have to put it in your list. But if you find an abbreviation like the word NIC, and you can't always remember what it stands for or what it does, please put it on the list and make a note of it and memorize that list. You're going to need to know that for the exam, guys. So often you might find you do actually understand the question, but now simply because you don't know or don't remember what the abbreviation stands for, now the whole freaking question doesn't make sense. And you're going to lose marks unnecessarily. So to avoid losing marks unnecessarily for stupid stuff, please memorize these abbreviations. Very big fat tip I can give you guys. Anyway, so going back to the question, you are concerned the amount of traffic generated will exceed 1 gigabit. Higher throughput network interface cards are not available for this installation. Which of the following is the best solution for this problem? Alright, so my problem here for my company is I am concerned that the traffic is going to be a lot. A lot of traffic, however, I'm stuck with old slow network cards. Normally, the best choice would be to go and get yourself faster network cards so you can handle more data, more bandwidth, more throughput, as they said. But since I'm stuck with old network cards that do not have the ability to go and exceed 1 gigabit per second, what is an alternative solution is what I'm asking you guys here. Is it answer A, install an additional NIC and configure LACP? Yes, guys, that actually is the answer here. So that is to go and do something called load balancing. It's also called NIC teaming. It's also called link aggregation. It's got many names. In a nutshell, what I'm doing is I'm adding more than one card where I would normally just have one, and I'm combining these 2 or more cards to act as one. So maybe your server would have had just one card in it, and this one card might have been a 1 gigabit card. But now this server has got 2 cards, maybe even 3 cards for all we know, And I've combined these bad boys together to act as one. So instead of the server being able to handle only 1 gigabit per second on a network, it can maybe now potentially handle 2 gigabits per second, or even 3 gigabits per second. It does coincidentally give you a couple other benefits as well, like redundancy or fault tolerance, because if I've got 2 cards or 3 cards in a server, and one of them happens to break, or something happens to one of them, at least the link does not go down. It'll just get slower. So the only thing the users will experience on their end is they'll see, oh, why is this connection so slow today? They'll see it's slower, but the service is not unavailable. So it's also going to give you a sense of high availability. So you're achieving high availability, fault tolerance, redundancy. Those are all coincidental benefits you're going to get out of this. But the main benefit we wanted right now is to get higher throughput. Answer B there, we know it's not B, C, or D. Answer B says install a solid-state drive to decrease the processing time. Yeah, it might make it faster internally, this server, but it's not going to solve your network throughput. We've got a throughput issue on the network. Putting a faster hard drive in is not going to solve your throughput issue. It's only going to make your speed faster internally inside the server. But at the end of the day, the server can only send the information so fast on the network, so it's not going to solve that issue. Answer C. Remove some of the applications from the server. Once again, that's only going to make the server itself faster, but it's not going to solve the network speed issue. Only the server itself will be faster, but once again, it's going to be bottlenecked on the network. Answer D. Configure port mirroring to send traffic to another server. No, guys. Port mirroring is something we do to go and inspect traffic. It's not to speed up traffic, it's to inspect traffic. So I'm cloning the traffic, if you want to call it that, or port mirroring. It's sending a duplicate of the traffic to a secondary server, and that is normally done for security purposes. So we can inspect it in that second server and see if anyone or anything is up to some sort of shenanigans. So it's kind of like doing random checks at the airport, if you want to call it that. So they're going to grab some random people and say, can you please step this side, sir? We want to check your luggage and blah, blah, blah. And they're probably going to check for drugs and stuff like that. So it's a form of security. It's used for inspection purposes, not for speed purposes. So the answer is and remains A, guys. Question 9. You have been asked to install a false camera outside one of the buildings of BurningIceTech to assist with physical security. Which of the following is the device assisting with? Now looking at the answers down below, guys, will it assist us with recovery? No. Even if this was a real camera, keep in mind this is a false one. Even if it was a real camera, it will not necessarily assist you with recovery. It's only going to be there to, well, kind of discourage people from doing this in the first place. Answer B, detection. Now, if it was a real camera, it might have helped with detection, but it's not a real camera. It's a false camera. So what is this going to help us with? It's not going to help us with detection. It doesn't do anything. Not in that regard, at least. Answer C, identification. No. Once again, it's a false camera. It's not going to do anything. It's not going to allow you to see afterwards. You're not going to be able to recover using this camera. You're not going to be able to detect using this camera. You're definitely not going to be able to identify people using this camera because it is fake. The only answer that's left there is D, prevention. Yes. So if this is a dummy camera, we often call them dummy cameras. The idea behind it is to trick people into thinking that it's real, and hopefully this will discourage people from committing the crime in the first place. So it's a preventative measure. It's to kind of scare them. It's a scaring tactic, if you want to call it that. All right, moving on to question 10. Which of the following attack vectors represents a large number of devices sending access requests to a website at the same time, making it unavailable to respond? Alright, so we are basically bombarding a website, public or internal. It's probably going to be a public website. We're bombarding it with so much traffic to the point where it just kind of times out or crashes. What do we call that? Is it A, ransomware? No, guys. Ransomware, it normally encrypts data and it demands a ransom. That's generally what it does. This can be on one person's machine, can be on multiple people's machines. You better hope you don't get this on multiple machines. So generally, as soon as one machine in a company is infected by this, then you'll find it very soon after that, all the machines are going to be infected. Most forms of ransomware will spread on the network. They will immediately encrypt everything on the machine. And what they generally have in common is you're going to see some sort of prompt on the screen. It's going to give you a timer. You normally have between 24 hours and 72 hours somewhere. I think the default's normally about 48 hours. When you've got to pay a ransom in the form of cryptocurrency, most commonly being Bitcoin, failing which they threaten to delete your data. So that's generally what's going to happen with ransomware, but it's not going to make a server unavailable. Answer B, a botnet. Now that's very close to being the answer, and I put that there on purpose, but it's not the answer. So a botnet is when somebody, this could be us, could be somebody else, somebody infected a very large amount of computers with malware, basically making these machines what we call zombie PCs. They are now going to be doing my bidding. And this bot network can be seen as a supercomputer. So this can be only like 100 machines, it can be 1,000, tens of thousands, or even 100,000 or more. The point is, all of these machines are infected with this malware, making them zombie PCs. And I, as the owner of this botnet, I can give it an instruction. And this instruction can be go do a mass spam attack. It can be to do a mass denial of service attack. It can be to do a mass phishing attack or a brute force attack. A brute force is to go and crack a password. So these are most commonly used to go and crack passwords to servers and things like that. It's essentially a supercomputer. Now, normally you'll notice that they don't use a lot of resources. They only sap like 1% of your resources. And even experienced IT individuals will not necessarily miss a 1% of the resources. So if there's like 1% of your CPU being used and 1% of your RAM being used by something in the background, unless you saw it listed somewhere under processes, you're not going to know 1% is missing. If I take 1%, 1%, 1% from enough machines, you've got yourself some serious processing power. And I can go and use that now to go and crack passwords and do all those other things I've just mentioned. So a bot network is basically a supercomputer that's used for, well, all kinds of shenanigans. But it's not used for something specific. It can be used for various shenanigans. Answer D, distributed denial of service attack. That is a very specific attack. And that attack's purpose is specifically to go and overload a service or server of some kind. This can be a website server with so much traffic to the point where it overloads it and it's going to time out or it's going to crash, which is exactly what's happening in this scenario, this question of mine. So the answer here, guys, is answer C, in case you guys didn't know. A distributed denial of service attack is specifically what the question entails here. It's to go and overload this website of so much traffic to the point where it cannot respond anymore. It's just going to time out, if you want to call it that. A botnet can achieve that, but a botnet can do lots of things. So the question specifically said attack vector. A botnet is not necessarily an attack vector. A botnet is a tool that you're going to use to do a distributed denial of service attack. So the C is the actual attack. Distributed denial of service is the actual attack taking place. A botnet, yes, that might be the tool we use, but it's not the actual attack. A botnet can be used for various things, to crack a password and all kinds of stuff. So that's why it's not 100% the answer. If distributed denial of service was not there, then yes, the answer would have been botnet. But botnet is not close enough to being the answer. A virus is normally just code that's got malicious intent behind it. It's to go and do some sort of harm on your machine. But it's not going to make a website unavailable by overloading it with traffic. It's just instead going to break something on your machine. Question 11. You have been called into BurningIceTech to troubleshoot a problem. Oh goody. Some users are having issues connecting to an application server on the local network. While testing connectivity using the ping tool, I hope you guys know what that tool does, you discover that you're able to ping the server successfully using its computer name. But pinging its fully qualified domain name, in other words FQDN, that fails. Which of the following is most likely the source of the problem? Is it answer A, DHCP? No, guys. DHCP is a server role that we use for dishing out IPs. It could be on your router. DHCP is built into most routers and it's turned on by default. But regardless of whether this is on your router or on a server, the DHCP's purpose is to issue IP addresses. It's got nothing to do with this question here. So if someone is able to reach a machine or something via its IP address, but not its name, yeah, DHCP's got nothing to do with that. Is the answer EMI? Electromagnetic interference is what that stands for. No, guys. If EMI was an issue, that would normally be an issue on network cables. So first of all, this question talks about nothing regarding network cables. And even if it did, The person can still ping the PC, but they cannot use the fully qualified domain name. So if it was EMI, neither of them would work. It'll work for both of them, and then it would not work for both of them. But the fact that only the one works and not the other one tells me it's not EMI. Answer C. DNS. That is to convert names to IPs and IPs to names in a nutshell, but it's not the only thing that it does. It does a lot of things. So I can probably go ahead and tell you guys the answer is C here, because name resolution is not taking place. So if you can ping a machine, for example, with its IP address, and sometimes you cannot reach it with its name, or in this case, its fully qualified domain name, it means the DNS is not doing what it's supposed to be doing. It's supposed to go and resolve that IP address or that name, and it's not doing that. It's not doing its job. So if I can only reach it via the one but not the other one, it means your settings are correct, on the machine. So IP address settings is correct. Your cable is not faulty. Your wireless signal is not faulty. It's a different issue. It's a DNS issue. Answer D, ACL. We know that's not the answer. That's for access control list. We're going to see that again listed later as an answer. So I hope you guys remember what I'm about to tell you. An access control list is something you'll normally do on a switch, but this can be done and used on other devices as well. It's usually used to control the flow of traffic. So depending on where you are coming from and where you want to go to on a network, the access control list will either block you or allow you. So if it sees you coming from a certain location, or if it sees you going to a certain location, it'll either block you or allow you based on those factors. Question 12. You have been asked by BurningIceTech to install a pair of redundant servers, and you must choose whether to run them in an active-active or active-passive configuration. Running the servers in an active-active configuration provides which of the following advantages that the same servers in an active-passive configuration do not? Alright, so you'll see there I said choose all the answers that apply. So there's more than one correct answer here, guys. Well, at least that's what I did. I could probably just have said, choose all and only give you guys one answer to go and choose. But I wanted to make it interesting. So I'll tell you guys, there's 2 correct answers that I want from you guys here. I should have actually made it interesting and made it 3 correct answers just to mess with you guys. But anyway, so what benefits does active-active give you versus active-passive? Is it fault tolerance? No. Fault tolerance is something you'll get with both active-active and active-passive. So if you don't know what active-active is, guys, that is when something is able to kick in immediately. So if I've got 2 servers, and these are 2 clone servers, they're both going to be running at the same time. So maybe my users are only accessing one of these 2 servers. The second server is just idling parallel to the main server. It's literally on hot standby. And as soon as that first server were to go offline for whatever reason, maybe it crashes, it's down for maintenance, restarts because of an update, whatever the case might be. So if that first server goes offline or becomes unavailable for any reason, the second server was already running and it will kick in immediately, instantly. So at no point in time will the service that was being rendered be unavailable. So that's basically what active-active is. Active-passive means you do have a backup server, but that backup server is maybe turned off, as an example. It's there, it's not idling like active-active, it's turned off. And if something happens to the main server, you've got to go and turn on the backup server first and get it up and running first. That could potentially take minutes, an hour or 2, even a whole day to get it up and running. That's active-passive. So you've got something, but it's not immediate. So both of these 2, active-active and active-passive, give you fault tolerance. So if you think about it, even active-passive, yes, it might take a while to get us there, but you will still be able to recover from that. It might just take a minute, or it might take an hour to get you there, but you will get there. So fault tolerance, no, that's not a benefit you get only with active-active. Looking at answer B, increased performance. Yes, active-active, if need be, can give you increased performance. It depends on how you set this up. So since both servers are clones, and since both of them are running at the same time, something you can go and do, and most people will go and do this, is they will do what we call load balancing between them. They're identical, keep that in mind. So I'm going to be pulling the information from both of them at the same time. So it's pointless to have both of them run at the same time and to only have, one of them working or doing all the work here. You might as well put them both to some use here and have people access information on both of them at the same time. They're splitting the load, essentially, is what they're doing. Load balancing. And if one of them were to become unavailable for whatever reason, then the connection will just become slower, maybe. but that's it. It's not going to become unavailable. It's just going to become slower. So one of the two answers we're looking for here is answer B. Answer C, hybrid. No, guys. Hybrid is when you've got something, for example, online and something on premises. A good example would be Active Directories. You've got Active Directory on premises, your old school Active Directory, and at the same time, you or this client's company has got Active Directory in the cloud. That is just one example of hybrid. See, here we don't have something online in a cloud and something on, on premises. There's nothing mentioned regarding that in this question. We're talking about active and active passive. So the answer is not hybrid. So that leaves us the answer D, load balancing. And I accidentally gave away that answer earlier. So if you've got two servers running right next to one another at the same time, they're both active, you can do something called load balancing if need be. So it'll split the load, but in turn it'll also increase the performance since people are reading from both servers at the same time. So if one server had 1 gigabit card in it, and the other server had a 1 gigabit card in it, people can now read the information at 2 gigabits per second instead of 1 gigabit per second. So we get performance and we get load balancing. Question 13. You have been tasked to prevent users in BurningIceTech from using common passwords. Which of the following Windows password policies includes provision to prevent users from specifying common passwords? So if you don't know what common passwords means, guys, that it means you're using an actual normal word. I want to prevent, or you need to prevent people from using normal words as password. It needs to be a mix of things. So we want to prevent people from using just a normal word as a password. So which of the following password policies will prevent users from using a normal word as a password? Is it answer A, minimum password length? No, guys. I mean, if I go and make the minimum password length 8 characters, by the way, it normally is like 8 characters, it's not going to stop people from using a normal word. They'll be forced to use a word that's maybe 8 characters long, and there's lots of words you'll find in a dictionary that's 8 characters long. So they just can't use a word that's shorter than 8 characters, but they can still use a normal word. So A is not going to achieve our goal here. Answer B, enforce password history. So password history is to prevent people from using a password that they've used previously before. So they might not be able to use a normal word password they've used previously before, but it does not stop them from choosing an entirely new password, which happens to also be a normal word. So it's not going to stop that. Answer C, complexity requirements. Yes, guys, that is the answer. Complexity requirements is something you'll find on almost all websites and all platforms these days. It forces the user to have an uppercase, lowercase, number, symbol, all of that in the password. So it prevents people from using normal words as a password. They've got to have a special character in there. They've got to have a normal number in there. Uppercase, lowercase, all of it's got to be in there. The more complex it is, the harder it is to crack this password. So the answer is C. The last one there, password age. How long will the password last before it expires? So if you set a password age, after a certain period of time, it's going to prompt the user to go and change their password. So this will normally be about 4 to 6 weeks in the average company. It can potentially never expire in some companies. I've seen that. And in other companies, they'll go and put this to the extreme. They'll make a password expire like literally every 7 days or every 14 days. So I would not recommend making them expire that quickly. So the sweet spot's normally about after 4 weeks or 6 weeks. Then someone's password will expire and they're going to go and choose a new fresh one. Question 14. You have been given a task by BurningIceTech to configure a wireless network to allow clients to authenticate only when the signal strength of their connection exceeds a specified level. Which of the following best describes this configuration? Alright, so what I want you guys to do here is I need you to configure a wireless network, and the people in this network of mine, my staff members and whoever, they should only be able to connect to this network if their signal strength is a certain level. What do we call that kind of configuration? Is it called port security? No, guys. Port security is for the most part something we'll do on switches. So that's to prevent unauthorized devices from connecting to a switch. So if you've got a bunch of devices like laptops and computers, desktop computers and stuff connected to a switch, if one of them happens to be unplugged from the switch and someone plugs something else into that port will then go and proceed to do something. It'll either send just an alert to the administrators, or it'll actually enforce some sort of security on the port by like shutting it down, for example. Most commonly, companies will go and shut down the port. So if I go and pull out your cable from a switch and I put in my own cable into that switch port, it's going to shut down the port on me and I'm not going to be able to do anything. That's an example of port security. It's got nothing to do with wireless networks. Answer B, geofencing. Yes, that is indeed the answer. Geofencing, for those of you that don't know, is to limit people to a certain area. So often what we'll do is we'll go on purposely strengthen the signal or weaken the signal when it gets broadcasted. Not all access points and routers have got this functionality, so it's normally the more expensive brands. And even though you might have an expensive brand, it might still not have this functionality. But what the IT team will essentially go and do is they will go and check where the boundaries of their office building is, up to where they want to allow people to go and connect. If people are outside the office building, outside in the garden or in the basement parking or wherever your office, limits are, then they should not be able to connect wirelessly to the office network. So what they'll go and do is they will go and play with this for a couple of days. This is normally before the people get to the office. They will go and strengthen the signal, weaken the signal, and they'll actually go and check up to how far they can go and reach the signal. So if they are just beyond the boundaries of the office walls and they see they can still get access to the signal, they can still jump onto the Wi-Fi, then they will go and weaken it just a little bit. Just so much so that people are inside the building so they can still connect to the wireless, but as soon as they go beyond the office building walls, then they cannot connect to the wireless. It's to avoid leakage, so the people outside your building that don't work for you, so they can't hack you. I mean, it's one thing to hack a network, but it's difficult to hack a network if you can't reach the network to begin with. There are a lot of very skilled people out there in the world, guys. So you can have the world's best security, and at the end of the day, it's still going to get hacked, that network of yours. But it makes it very difficult for them to hack something if they can't reach that something. They've got to be in your building to get a hold of the wireless signal. As soon as they are in your parking or just beyond the walls of your office building, they can't reach the signal, which means they can't hack your Wi-Fi. That is an example of geofencing. Motion detection, I think we know what that is. So you get motion detectors that literally do just that. They detect motion and they'll alert someone somewhere that something's happening, or it'll trigger some sort of alarm. But you'll also find a lot of cameras these days. Surveillance cameras that got motion detecting built into them, where the camera will only record if it sees motion. It's a great way to save space on a hard drive or something like that. Then you get other ones where the camera will constantly record, and the motion detection is just to make an alert on the system. So that if someone wants to go and review the footage afterwards, it'll highlight different parts of the footage in red and some of it in green. Green just means there's nothing happening. But if it's highlighted in red, it means there was some sort of movement. Even I've got surveillance cameras like that at my house. So at my house, if someone was on my premises or near my premises, I can always just go and skip to the red scenes and I can see exactly who was there and when this was. I don't have to go and skim through the whole footage because that's going to take forever in a day. So the motion detection is just to make your life a little bit easier, essentially. The last one there, local authentication. That is to prove you are who you claim to be or what you claim to be. Most likely who you claim to be. So that's a form of authentication to prove your identity. And I'm most likely going to be logging into something like a laptop or a desktop, and it's going to check locally on that device if you are who or what you claim to be. It's not going to check on some sort of central point like an Active Directory. And it's got nothing to do with this question, by the way. Anyway, moving on to question 15. Which of the following attack types are specifically directed at wireless networks? Choose all that apply. Answer A, yes, an evil twin. So for those of you not familiar with this term, that is when somebody goes and creates an extra router or access point. Normally it's going to be a router. And this is in the hopes of tricking users into connecting on their router instead of the real one. So you can imagine yourself having a company. You've got a company now, and I kind of sneak into your company of a router. I can hide it even in a box, believe it or not. And this router, I'm going to go onto it and I'm going to change the SSID on that router to be the exact same as your company. There's multiple ways to go about this, but most commonly they will go and change the SSID on that fake router to be the exact same as the one on your real router. That's the name of the wireless network, in case you guys don't know what the SSID is. So it's going to be the exact same name. Your wireless network might have an actual password on it. And in my fake one doesn't have one. Now, you might think that's not going to make a difference. It does, because normally the first time you connect to a network, it's going to ask you for a password, And then the second and the third and the fourth time, it normally does not because your machine remembers the password. Now, if I remove the password on mine, it's going to give you that same sense, that same feeling, where they're going to click on it, it's just going to auto-connect because there's no password requirement, and they're going to think they're on the right network. Meanwhile, they're not. And as soon as you connect to my fake network, I'm going to go and hack your device and get all kinds of useful information like usernames and passwords and cookies and whatnot that I need to connect to your real network and, well, penetrate your real network. So answer A is one of the answers. Answer B, phishing. No, phishing is not specifically directed at wireless networks. Phishing, you get different kinds of phishing, but the most commonly this will entail me sending you an email, and I'm going to pretend to be someone or something I'm not, in the hopes of tricking you or the user into giving me sensitive information, like a username and a password and all that. So it's not necessarily directed at wireless networks. So it's not answer B. Answer C, war driving. Yes, war driving is specifically directed at wireless networks. You can go and read up on this if you want to. So that's when I'm driving around, walking around, scanning for wireless networks that I can go and hack. So you'll find people often do this in malls, because in a mall there's obviously lots of businesses, and most of these businesses have a wireless network. So I'm going to be walking around with my phone or my laptop. I'm going to be scanning and scanning and scanning as I'm walking around for wireless networks, and I'm going to keep trying to break into these networks. That's generally in a nutshell what war driving entails. But you'll actually find people driving slowly in their cars as well, near an office park or something, and they'll try and achieve the same goal. So answer A and answer C are both correct. Answer D, brute force. Nope, that's not an answer. So the answers here are A and C. Brute force is to go and crack a password, specifically by guessing the password. Now, yes, you can do this as a human being, so that is normally only something we'll do if it's someone you know very, very well. So if they've got a very easy peasy password and you know this person very, very well, yes, you can go and guess the password as a human being. But 99% of the time, brute force attacks are executed using software. A piece of software will try and guess all kinds of combinations of what this person's password might potentially be. So the answer is and remains A and C, folks. Question 16. A senior IT administrator at BurningIceTech was terminated 2 weeks ago. Today, you arrived at the office and found that all of the hosts in the web server farm had their data deleted. Oh, goody. There are no unauthorized entries to the data center recorded, but you suspect that the terminated administrator is responsible for deleting the data. Which of the following attack types might the previous administrator have directed at the web server farm? Alright, so to conclude here, we've got ourselves a web server farm, and we have an old IT person that used to work for my company. They used to work about 2 weeks ago, and then they got terminated. So we let them go or whatever. They got fired. Most likely they got fired. So 2 weeks ago, I had an IT person. They got fired. And this person probably went and did something right before they left. What kind of attack is that old IT administrator of mine? He's probably disgruntled, he or she. What are they doing now? Now keep in mind, we said there is no logs. No unauthorized entries in the data center has been recorded. So how the heck did they do it if they did not actually get in? Is it an evil twin? No, we know what an evil twin is based on what we said in the previous question. An evil twin is to trick people to connect to your router. It's not an evil twin, guys. The servers have been deleted, just in general. So an evil twin, if he or she used an evil twin, they would have tricked my users into connecting to their network, and this would be probably to obtain their credentials. After which this old administrator of mine would use the credentials to log back into my network to go and do the shenanigans. But if they logged back in, we would have seen an entry in the records. Now the question specifically says no entries. There's no entries that has been recorded, so it was not an evil twin. Is it a dictionary attack? A dictionary attack is a form of password attack, where I wouldn't say I guess the password, but I use actual words in the English dictionary. So it's going to use actual words in the dictionary in the hopes of, that potentially cracking a password. Now, that doesn't actually work on most people's passwords anymore, because all websites and platforms these days have got complexity requirements. It forces the user to have an 8-character password. It forces the user to have an uppercase, lowercase, numbers and symbols, all that shenanigans in their password. So dictionary attacks don't actually work. And even if it did work, let's say for the purpose of this question, a dictionary attack did work. That would mean they got into someone's account, which would mean they logged in, which would mean it would be recorded in the logs. and it specifically says nothing was recorded. So it's not A, it's not B. Answer C, a logic bomb. Yes, a logic bomb is something we have not mentioned yet in this video, and I don't think I've even mentioned that in the previous questions video. A logic bomb is something that's basically on a timer. So he or she scheduled something to happen. They schedule something to go and, let's say, delete the service perhaps. So this could be as simple as hooking something up to Task Scheduler, for crying out loud. You can do that on the client operating systems as well as the server operating systems. It's not the only way to achieve this. So they might have written a script, and they might have hooked the script up to Task Scheduler, just to give you an example, and that thing was scheduled to execute 2 weeks after they leave. So by then it's not going to look like them, but obviously all the signs and symptoms point toward this IT person. So that's a logic bomb, guys. It's hooked up to a timer most likely. So that's the answer. Answer D here is social engineering. That's not the answer. Social engineering is tricking people into doing something they're not supposed to. Often, you'll find social engineering is combined with other forms of attacks like phishing. So one form of social engineering would be if I add you as a friend on Facebook or on X or Instagram, and after a couple of weeks or months or so of being friends, I'm going to start asking you questions, and these questions are actually your security questions. But I'm going to do it slowly. I'm going to ease into it. And I'm not going to ask all your security questions back to back. I'm going to ask you one today, and then another one in a couple of days. And without you realizing, you are giving me the answers to your security questions. That's one form of social engineering. Another one would be where I trick you into, for example, holding a door open for me at your company. Meanwhile, I don't work at your company. This is very effective at huge companies where they've got hundreds, if not thousands of employees. So, yeah, I mean, if I'm going to come there and I'm going to say, hey, can you please hold the door open for me? And I pretend like my hands are full. You're going to obviously hold the door open for me because you want to be polite. Meanwhile, I tricked you into holding the door open for me because I can't open the door. I don't work there. That's an example of social engineering. Question 17. One of the technicians in BurningIceTech is testing out a new application that they designed. The technician has discovered that it contains a weakness that could enable an attacker to gain full administrative access. Which of the following is another term for this weakness? Is it an exploit? No, guys. An exploit is when you go and specifically exploit some sort of weakness. So here they mention the technician discovered their own weakness in their own program. What do we call that? An exploit is when I, for example, let's say I'm the attacker here, I specifically go and look for a weakness and I exploit it, I abuse it. I actually go and use this weakness in your system to gain access or to go and do some sort of harm. That's exploit. Honeypot is normally something we'll use as a diversion of sorts. So I will go and put a honeypot on my network. This is normally in huge companies where we go and do this. And it's a temporary distraction for hackers and attackers. They are going to think they're attacking my real servers and resources. Meanwhile, it's fake servers and resources they're attacking. So it's to give me an early detection system so I can see, oh, we're under attack, guys. Please note, let's go and cover our ports and close the ports and turn off the services and do this and do that. So it's not just going to alert you, but it's going to also show you what these guys are up to. So by the time they realize that, oh shucks, we are on a fake server, it's too late because you already know they're there and you've already gone and hardened your real servers and your real resources so they can't get in. So honeypot is basically just a means for you to buy more time for yourself and to detect when someone's up to some sort of shenanigans. It's a diversion of sorts. But that's not the answer here. Answer C, vulnerability. Yes, a weakness in something is called a vulnerability. This is not just limited to softwares. We actually use that terminology all over in real life. So if there's some sort of weakness in something, we call that a vulnerability. So if a technician here has discovered a weakness in their own software, and that is called a vulnerability. And they need to obviously go and patch that or fix it or put in some sort of remedy so there's no longer some sort of vulnerability. Otherwise, you will have an exploit later down the line. Someone's going to exploit that vulnerability. So the answer is and remains C. Answer D is mitigation. Mitigation is just a solution to a problem in most cases in IT. Question 18. Which of the following password policies are designed to prevent brute force attacks? Now, brute force is something I have mentioned in this video, I think more than once in this video, and I believe I have mentioned that in the other video as well, in version 1 of my practice questions. So just again, guys, if you have not seen version 1 of my practice questions, please go and check that out as well. It's got 70 questions, where this video has only got 50 questions. And it doesn't really matter in which order you want it. You can watch version 2 first and then version 1, or either or, as long as you just try and cover as many of these questions as possible. And at the end of the day, it's to prepare you better for the exam. The more you do, the better. So getting back to brute force, that is when I try and crack your password in most cases. I'm going to probably use software and it's going to guess your password. Now, yes, as a human being, I can go and guess your password like I said earlier, but likely I'm not going to be doing that. 99% of the time, I'm going to be using some sort of software to try and guess your password. At the end of the day, you can never completely stop this, but there are certain things you can go and put in place to make it as difficult as possible for me to get in. What are those policies? Answer A says password length policies. Yes, guys, that's one of the policies you can go and enforce. The longer someone's password is, the longer it's going to take my brute force attack to crack that password. It doesn't really matter what characters you've got. It's just the more characters there is, the longer it takes. So up to about 3 or 4 characters, you can maybe go and crack with one PC of an i7. But as soon as it goes more than 4 characters, which is most passwords, you're going to need more than just an i7. You are going to need a very, very beefed up computer like a botnet. Something we mentioned earlier in this video. So a botnet is essentially a supercomputer. I mean, unless you happen to get your hands on an actual supercomputer, but that's probably not going to be happening. So the next best thing would be for you to go and combine many, many computers together to act as one. What do we call that? A botnet. I'm going to make all these machines zombie PCs. I'm going to make them all work together as one, and I'm going to use that to try and crack your password. But even that has its limits, guys. The longer your password is, the longer it's going to take to crack. And by the time my machine cracks it, there is a possibility that your password might have expired, and then I might need to go and start all over. Looking at answer B, account lockout policies. Now that, guys, is even more effective in my opinion than password length policies. Password length policies will just make the password cracking take so much longer. But account lockout policy is going to make me stop completely in my tracks. So most companies on most platforms will have a policy that locks after about 3 wrong attempts. So if I try and crack your passwords after 3 wrong attempts, it's going to either lock your account or time out your account. It's probably going to time it out. And then eventually after a while, after this thing stops timing out and I try again, if I get it wrong again, it's just going to time out immediately again. And sometimes you'll find it'll just keep getting longer and longer subsequently after that. So it's going to completely bring me to a grinding halt. That machine of mine, that supercomputer of mine, it's going to mean absolutely nothing if there's a lockout policy. And yet, most companies don't use lockout policies. Yes, there's lots of companies out there that use them, but a lot of companies do not use them. And if you look at something like group policies, for example, on premises, that's completely for free, guys. And yet, so many companies don't use this. I've done a lot of penetration testing in my life. When I had to go to companies, I would get paid to break into them legally. This is completely legal. And the idea was for me to go and test their security. And if I get in, I'm supposed to give this company a report as to how I got in and what they can go and do to mitigate against this. And one of the reasons I got in is because a lot of these clients of mine did not have lockout policies. And one of my suggestions to these clients would be, go and put lockout policies. I mean, if you look at something like group policy, it's free. It's not going to cost you anything. Just go and put it on, for crying out loud. And yet many companies would not go and put it on. So far answers A and B is correct, guys. Answer C, password history policies. No, guys, password history policies, that is to prevent people from using passwords they've previously used before, but it's not going to make any difference to a brute force attack, since a brute force attack is literally just going to go and try all possible combinations. So it makes no difference with a brute force attack, none whatsoever. So C is not correct. Answer D, complex password policies. Not so much. If people are guessing it as human beings, then complex password policies will probably work. But a brute force attack does not get stopped by complex passwords. It only gets stopped by password length characters. So brute force, like I said, is literally going to try all the possible key combinations. So if your password is 4 characters long, it's going to try all the possible combinations of 4 characters, whether it be numbers, letters, uppercase, lowercase. It's going to try all of them. So complexity does not make a difference of a brute force attack. Only length makes a difference of brute force. The more characters you have, the more it's going to go and try. So if you have 5 characters instead of 4 characters, it's going to take that brute force attack of mine so much longer to go and crack that password. If it's 6 characters, so much longer. So complexity is just there to prevent dictionary attacks. It is there to prevent rainbow table attacks, and it's to prevent normal people from just guessing as a human being. But it does not stop a brute force attack. A brute force parser attack is the most dangerous kind of parser attack you can get. The only thing that helps against that is A and B. Question 19. Which of the following was the first wireless LAN security protocol to come into common usage? Alright guys, so many moons ago, we didn't actually have as many wireless encryption standards as we have today. So the first one that came out, which is obviously the weakest one, is WEP. So you guys already know what the answer there is. It's answer C. So WEP is the first encryption that came out. It's the oldest one and it's the least secure one. You guys can definitely expect a couple of questions about this in your N+ exam, and this is actually normally asked in the A+ exam as well. So the first one is WEP. The least secure one is WEP. And obviously, the newer they are, normally they would go and release a newer version because there was a need. The previous version was normally too weak, or there was some sort of security vulnerabilities in it, and it would normally make a need for them to go and create a newer, better one. The second one that came out, which is obviously newer and more secure, is WPA. The third one that came out, which is even more secure, the most secure are the ones we've got in front of us, is WPA2. Now, if anyone here is wondering what the heck answer D then is, answer D, being TKIP, that is short for Temporal Key Integrity Protocol. That, guys, is the encryption method used by WPA. So WEP has its own encryption that it uses. WPA has its own encryption that it uses. So WPA uses TKIP. And if you look at something like WPA2, that uses something called AES, which is not even listed here. So AES is normally Advanced Encryption Standard, which is obviously the most secure kind of encryption you can get. Anyway, folks, the answer remains WEP. Question 20. Which of the following would allow a device to maintain the same IP address lease based on the physical address of the network card? Alright, so what we need to achieve here is we want a device to receive the same IP address from the DHCP every day over and over. And this is normally done using the physical address of a network card. So in other words, that is called the MAC address. We link it to the MAC address. It's going to issue the same IP address to the same device due to its MAC address. What do we call that? Now you might know the answer now since I said MAC address. Is it answer A, IP address exclusion? No, guys. Exclusion is something you'll go and configure on the DHCP server to prevent it from issuing a certain IP address in its scope. So the scope, which is also known as a range, is how many IP addresses the DHCP has to dish out, and from where does it start, and from where does it end. Now, if there happens to be an IP address in that scope or in that range which should not be dished out dynamically, maybe because this IP address has been statically allocated to something like a server. If that happens to be the case, you need to go and exclude that IP address so that it does not get dished out to some random device. Otherwise, you're going to have yourself an IP address conflict on the network that's going to kick out both devices. We don't want that. But the answer is not A. Answer B, MAC address reservation. Yes, guys. So on a DHCP server, normally only the actual servers, it's very rare you'll find this functionality on a router. I have seen routers with this functionality, but it's rare. So normally on an actual DHCP server, you will go and create a reservation. So that's going to configure that DHCP to dish out the same IP address to the same MAC address every day over and over. Answer C and D, we obviously know that's not the answer now. So answer C, IP address lease period. So that means how long this IP address will be valid for before it expires. That does not apply to static IPs, which are also known as fixed IPs, or in some cases, manual IP addresses. It only applies to dynamic IP addresses that you get from a DHCP. These dynamic IPs you get from a DHCP, they expire. How long? Well, that depends on what you configure. So the default period is about 8 days, but normally we'll go and reduce that to approximately 1 day. So if someone does not get themselves a new IP address within that period, or they don't renew the old IP address they had in that period, the IP address would expire and they will no longer have access to any resources. Answer D, the scope. You already know what that is because of what I said earlier. The scope, which is also known as the range, is how many IPs you've got in your pool that you can go and dish out. And from where does it start and from where does it end. That's essentially your scope. Question 21. The users in BurningIceTech are reporting internet connectivity issues. Oh boy. You want to determine if the issues are internal to the company network or if there is an issue with the ISP. Which of the following tools should be used to best determine where the outage is occurring? You'll notice I put the word best there in capital letters. That's to draw attention to the fact that there might be more than one answer here. Now that concept, guys, is something you will also see in your actual exam. They love putting certain words in capital letters in the exam. The word best, or the word most, or the word least. Those words, if you see them in the exam, especially if they're in bold, it's to draw attention to the fact that there might be more than one correct answer, and they want to test and see if you know which one is more correct, or which one is the best suited for that specific scenario. Anyway, getting back to my question, so the users here are reporting internet connectivity issues. We want to check and see if the issue is inside my building or if it's beyond my building, if the issue is with my ISP. What command can I use to determine that? Is it answer A? Yes, guys. Trace route is to check where the internet is dropping. So you can go and trace anything. I can, for example, go into command prompt, type in tracert, space, and then I type in the IP address of a destination or the name of a destination, like a website, for instance. I can go type traceroute, www.google.com. It's going to trace it up to a maximum of 50 hops. Each hop is generally seen as a router, not necessarily, but it could be a router. And you'll see on average it's going to trace it only up to about 10 hops, give or take. It can go up to 50, but normally it'll time out after about 10 hops or so. So what happens then is after it starts tracing, you need to check where it drops. So if it drops at the first hop, then you know, okay, it's internal. It's inside your building. The issue is of your router. But if it only drops by like the third hop or the fourth hop, then you know it's your ISP or beyond your ISP. In other words, it's not your problem. It's not within your reach. You will need to contact your ISP or potentially something or someone beyond your ISP to get this issue resolved. So the answer is A. Ping is a command we use in command prompt to test remote connectivity to a remote device. So this is to check if your configuration is correct and if there's any latency and how fast the connection is and all that kinds of stuff. So you're going to go to command prompt, you're going to type the word ping, followed by space, and you type in the remote server or destination's IP address or its name. It's going to send 4 packets of data which are exceptionally small to that destination, and if your configuration is correct, you'll get 4 replies. So you want to see 4 replies, but not just 4 replies. You want to see these 4 replies in a very quick manner. So it needs to reply very, very quickly as well. The NS lookup commands, I mean, all of these are command prompt commands, by the way. That is a command that in a nutshell allows you to go and check your DNS information. The ipconfig / flush DNS command is a command we'll go and use to go and clear our DNS cache. So all computers have a short-term memory when it comes to DNS. So any websites you visited recently, that will be stored in your DNS cache. Think of it as your computer's short-term memory. So when you go to a website the very, very first time, your computer does not know where that website is or what that website is. So it contacts something called the DNS. It's going to say, listen, my bro, what is this? Where is this? And the DNS will tell your computer where and what that is. And your computer is going to go and follow that route or that instructions the first time it goes to that website. This can be YouTube, for example. So the first time your machine wants to go to www.youtube.com, it's going to ask the DNS. DNS will tell it how to get there, and then the second and the third and the fourth time, it's not going to ask again because it remembers due to its short-term memory called the DNS cache. Now, sometimes the address that it remembers is no longer correct for various reasons. We might need to force the computer to ask the DNS all over again what the new address is. And to basically give your computer amnesia, to force it to forget its short-term memory, we use the command ipconfig / flush DNS. Anyway, folks, the answer is and remains A. Question 22. Which of the following would most, you see what I did there with the word most, I put it in capital letters for you guys. Which of the following would most likely be used to provide high-speed network connectivity between nearby buildings? Would it be coaxial cable? No, guys, that is very old legacy cable. So you got to keep in mind, these are buildings that are nearby, so they're not very, very far away from one another, but they're still quite a distance from one another. So these cables, most of them have got a distance limit. They can only go up to a certain distance before they have to be repeated. Now, if they only happen to get halfway, let's say between these two buildings, you cannot exactly go and repeat them there because there's going to be nothing in the middle. It's going to be in the middle of the street potentially or something like that. Maybe in a garden somewhere. So that's going to be an issue. So you need to get a cable that's going to be able to go one shot all the way from one building to another building without having to be repeated. Which cable is that? And you'll also see I did not mention cost as a factor, but I did say high speed. So speed is a factor, but cost is not. Coaxial cable is not the fastest cable, guys. It's a very slow cable. It's a legacy cable. It's old technology. So it's got a distance limit and it's got a speed limit. So coaxial is out because of its distance limit, and it's also out because of its speed limit. UTP is unshielded twisted pair, but that could be Cat5, it can be Cat5e, Cat6, Cat6a. All of the cables I've just mentioned, it doesn't really matter which one, all of them have got a distance limit of 100 meters if we're using the metric system. Realistically, in real life, it's only about 80 or 90 meters, but obviously the exam does not care about real life, they only care about what the manual says. So if we go according to what the manual says, which is 100 meters, the chances are very likely that that might not be enough. And there's also a possibility that this UTP cable they're talking about might potentially be Cat5 or slower. The question specifically states high-speed network connectivity. If we look at something like answer C, which is Cat5, that is not high speed, guys. The speed of Cat5 is 100 megabits per second. But Cat5 is Cat5. That's set in stone. It's not going to be either or. It will be Cat5. It will be 100 megabits per second. UTP, on the other hand, answer B, that can be either or. UTP could be Cat5. It could be Cat5e, which is 1 gigabits per second. So it could be, okay, it's a possible answer. So if it was not for answer D is the answer, by the way. If it was not for answer D, I would have chosen B because B could potentially be high speed. There is a potential, a chance that B might be Cat6. But the reason why I don't want to choose B is because of the distance factor. It's between nearby buildings. And there's a very good chance the cable is not going to be long enough. Where are you going to put this cable? It's not going to reach that cable without having to be repeated. So B is not going to work realistically because of its distance limitations. Answer D, fiber. Now, you'll see I just said fiber. I did not say what kind of fiber. You get different kinds of fiber. Some of them are slow speed. Some of them can only go up to 100 megabits per second. But most of them are very fast, and most of them can go massive distances, way further than your traditional UTP, Cat5, or coaxial cables. They can go way, way further. High-speed communication, and it's not limited by the same distances as the other cables. So the answer here, guys, is and remains D. Question 23. Which of the following did the second version of the Wi-Fi Protected Access Protocol add to the standard? Alright guys, so what I'm going to do here for you guys is I'm going to make a list again just to mention exactly in which order these encryptions came out. And with each of these versions, they brought out a special benefit, a special kind of encryption that came along with it. So just to remind you guys, the first version of wireless encryption that came out was WEP. So that's the oldest one, and it's also the least secure one. The second wireless encryption standard that came out was WPA. So obviously that's a little bit more secure than the previous version. It's a little bit newer. Newer is generally better. And with that, we got the new encryption called TKIP, which is obviously way more secure than the previous version of wireless encryption. Obviously as time goes by, people always find new ways to go and hack stuff and crack stuff. So there's constantly going to be a need to go and get newer and better stuff. And then eventually there was a point in time where we needed an even more secure wireless kind of encryption. And that was obviously because WPA had too many vulnerabilities. So the third one that came out is WPA2. And its other name is Wi-Fi Protected Access. So specifically the second version of Wi-Fi Protected Access. So if you just look at WPA, that is short for Wi-Fi Protected Access. And if I'm talking about version 2 of Wi-Fi Protected Access, I'm actually referring to WPA2. And the encryption we got with that standard was CCMP-AES. Alright, so I'm going to add that for you guys here on the screen just to remind you guys. So just once again, the encryption kind that we got with WPA, that was TKIP. The encryption we got with WPA2, that, guys, was CCMP-AES. So the AES is Advanced Encryption Standard. So CCMP, Advanced Encryption Standard is what that is. Now at this point in time, you probably know what the answer is. If you look at the question again, folks, which of the following did the second version of WPA protocol add to the standard? That is CCMP AES. So that's the answer. The answer is A here. Now answer B, MIMO, that is, well, it can actually be multiple things. In some cases it's the antennas on routers and stuff, but it's also the channels we've got with our wireless. The more channels you've got, the more bandwidth you can handle. So it's not exactly got anything to do with security. It's got to do with wireless, yes, I'll confirm that, but it's got nothing to do with wireless security. C is WEP, so that's just the first encryption that came out, but it doesn't tell us anything. We want to know what is the protocol, the encryption protocol that came out. So WEP, that's just to say that's the first one that came out, but it doesn't tell us what it does. The answer D, that's probably the second closest answer we'll get. So that is a protocol, one of the ones we're looking for, but it's for the wrong one. So TKIP is for WPA, the first one. And we are looking for the Wi-Fi protected protocol that got added to the standard on the second version of WPA. And that is answer A, guys. So answer A, that goes of WPA2. And answer D goes to WPA1. So the answer is and remains A. Question 24. Which of the following service models would most likely be used to replace on-premises servers with a cloud solution? Alright guys, so if you look at something like a server, that is normally seen as infrastructure. If you were to go and make these servers on premises virtual machines, assuming they're staying on premises, that would be still just infrastructure. It'll be virtual machines, but it's just infrastructure. It doesn't matter if it's physical servers or virtual servers, it is just infrastructure. And if you were to go and create these servers from scratch in the cloud, or if you were to go and upload their virtual hard drives to the cloud, what do we call that? It is still infrastructure, but now it's called infrastructure as a service. Your servers are now occupying space on someone else's hard drives. In this case, it's the cloud provider like Microsoft or Amazon or something. So it's occupying space on their hard drives. It's using their RAM, their CPU cycles. In general, we're just using their resources, and the cloud provider is rendering this machine back to you as a service. Usually this will be for a monthly fee, sometimes for a yearly fee. Now, in case you guys haven't spotted the answer yet, it's answer C, IaaS. That is infrastructure as a service. Now, out of all the cloud models we get, there's many kinds you get. Infrastructure as a service is the one where you still have the most amount of control. With all forms of cloud service models, you're always going to be relinquishing some level of control. The question here is, how much control are you going to be relinquishing? Infrastructure as a service, that is coincidentally the one where you've got the most amount of control. That is the answer. Now, answer A is software as a service. So if you had software installed on your laptop or your desktop or your server, it's just software or it's just an application. But if you go and install that somewhere else and run it somewhere else, like on a cloud provider service like Microsoft, for example, or Amazon, that, guys, is now referred to as software as a service. They're rendering that software back to you as a service. Now, that's one of the cloud service models where you've got the least amount of control. Answer B, being PaaS, that is platform as a service. So out of the three that I've just mentioned, software as a service is the one where you've got the least amount of control. That is followed by platform as a service, and then infrastructure as a service is the one where you've got the most amount of control. Now, between answer A, B, and C, those three are the three most common kinds of service cloud models you get, and it's also the three most popular kinds. And in a lot of courses, those are the only ones that's actually mentioned. You do get other ones out there as well. I mean, if you look at answer D, for instance, I did not make that up. That actually does exist. Answer D is disaster recovery as a service. It's not exactly something that's being used a lot at the moment, but it is becoming very popular very quickly. So disaster recovery as a service is a cloud computing service that allows businesses to protect their data and applications from disasters and service disruptions. How it works, though, is a business writes its data to a cloud service provider, which replicates the data to a managed data center. This, in turn, allows the business to restore its data and applications to a different location if its primary data center is unavailable. Question 25. Which of the following provides redundancy on a file server to ensure the server is still connected to a LAN even in the event of a port failure on a switch? So basically what we're saying here, folks, is we don't want to put all our eggs in one basket. So should a port on the switch fail, we don't want the link to go down. How can we get around that issue? Is it answer A, NIC teaming? Yes, folks, that is the answer. NIC teaming is also known as link aggregation, and it's got quite a few other names as well. So if you guys don't know what NIC teaming is, that is when you go and take a machine or a server, it's most likely going to be a server like in this situation, and you go and put in 2 or more network cards in that server. And then what you go and do is you go and link all those network cards to the same switch. So this could potentially be 2 network cards. Both of these 2 network cards have network cables plugged into them, and both of these network cables plug into the same switch on the other side. So this gives you multiple benefits. It gives you redundancy, so in the event of one of these network cards failing, or one of the cables failing, or in this case, one of the ports failing on a switch, then the link does not go down. So it gives you redundancy, gives you fault tolerance, gives you high availability, and to a certain extent will even give you load balancing. The only downside to this is, should something happen, the link's going to be a bit slower, but at least it's not going to be off, which is a heck of a lot better than being off, So I'll rather take a slow link than an off link. If you look at answer B, which we know is not the answer, obviously we know the answer is A here, RAID array. That is normally something we do with hard drives to get ourselves performance and redundancy, but that is with hard drives. It's got nothing to do with links. In this situation, we want to make sure a server stays connected. Nowhere here is it mentioned anything regarding hard drives. So we don't want to get redundancy of hard drives. We don't want to get performance out of hard drives. So it's got nothing to do with RAID. Then you got answer C, load balancer. Load balancer is something you can have either on premises or in the cloud, more commonly found in the cloud nowadays. And its purpose is to balance the load between servers. Not necessarily something you will go and connect to a switch. It is normally connected to multiple servers, and it will go and split the load between these respective servers. NIC teaming, however, is something that you will specifically go and connect to a switch, to ports on a switch. So A is the most appropriate answer here, the best answer if I have to put it like that. And answer C would have been my second choice if I really didn't have a choice, but answer C is not exactly what we're looking for here. The last answer there, D, UPS. Uninterruptible power supply. So that's a form of backup power. Most UPSs you'll find don't just provide backup power, they provide you with clean energy. They also provide you with a surge protector. So if you've got yourself a decent UPS for your computer, a 10-to-1 has a surge protector built into it. It's got a fuse in it, and it also gives you clean energy. So some people won't necessarily use this because they want a surge protector or because they want a backup power. They'll literally just use it because they want to make sure their machine gets clean energy, because in the long haul, that's a lot healthier and better for your machine. So in a nutshell, uninterruptible power supply, yes. Can be a surge protector, yes. Can provide you with clean energy, but its main purpose is to provide you with backup power in the event of a power failure of some kind. So it's not to keep the machines up and running for a very long time. Normally, it's literally just so you can go and save any open documents and shut down a machine properly and safely without causing any harm. But once again, it's got nothing to do with this specific question. Question 26, folks. Network connectivity in an extensive forest reserve was achieved using fiber optics. A network fault was detected, and now the repair team needs to check the integrity of the fiber cable. Which of the following actions can reduce repair time? Alright, so is that going to be answer A, using a multimeter to locate the fault point? So if you've got a faulty cable, if we're talking about fiber cable here, can we use a multimeter? No, guys, a multimeter is something you'll go and use on copper cables, and it's generally to go and test if there's electricity going through that cable and to see what the voltage and the amps and all that kinds of stuff is. It's got to do with copper cables, and it's got to do with electricity. It's got nothing to do with fiber. Fiber doesn't use electricity, it doesn't use copper, it uses light to go and transmit data. So A is completely and totally out. Answer B, using a tone generator, which is also called a toner probe, by the way. So using a tone generator and a wire map to determine the fault location. So a tone generator, folks, is generally used to locate a cable, so it's got that going for it, so it ticks that box, but it's not something we'll normally go and use of fiber cables. A tone generator is something we use with copper cables, and the question specifically states we are dealing with fiber cable. So a tone generator is not going to work because it's meant for copper cables, but other than that, if they said copper cable, we would have been able to use this tool because it would allow us to trace the cable in a wall. So if it's like a hollow wall, or if the cable is in the ceiling, you can go and trace where in the ceiling this cable goes. And in the event where this cable is mixed between many other cables, you're not sure which is which, you can go and use the tone generator. So how it works is you go and hook up this little machine to the one end of the cable, the part you're sure of is the right cable, and then you've got like a little magic wand of sorts, if I can call it that. And as soon as you hold this wand near the correct cable, it generates a tone, like a beeping tone. Hence the name tone generator. Answer C. Using an OTDR in one of the optic cables to get the fiber length information. Yes, guys. OTDR is a machine we specifically use with fiber cable. And it sends like a pulse down the fiber cable, and it bounces back and it tells you the length of the cable. So if you know for a fact this fiber cable is 2 kilometers long, if we're using the metric system that is, or let's say 2 miles long, and this thing bounces back and it tells you it's 1.5, then you know, this cable is broken. And you even know exactly where it is broken. It'll tell you exactly how long the cable is. And considering if you know exactly how long the cable was originally and how long it is now, you can figure out exactly where the potential damage in the cable might be. So the answer here, folks, is indeed answer C. Answer D there, using a punch down tool. So that is an actual tool, it does exist, but that's generally used with copper cables once again. And it's normally used to get these pesky cables into what we call a patch panel, if you guys know what a patch panel is, or to get them into a wall box, if you know what a wall box is. So this is normally used for your normal network cables that you'll plug into your RJ45 port, in other words. It's not the answer. The answer remains C. Question 27. Which of the following would be used to adjust resources dynamically for a virtual web server under variable loads? Alright guys, is it A, elastic computing? Right off the bat, I'm going to tell you yes. Elastic computing is a terminology we use in the cloud. It is a benefit we get in the cloud, and it means resources can automatically, dynamically increase or decrease as needed. So if the cloud provider, let's say this is Microsoft or Amazon, for example, those are the two most popular ones. If they see your server, let's call this a web server since that's what the question says. If they see your server's running low on resources because there's an unexpected spike on your website, they will automatically increase the resources of your server to prevent it from crashing. And if they see the load goes down, they will automatically decrease the resources. Now the reason why they decrease it is because in the cloud you pay for what you use, and if you're not using it, you're not paying for it, which is why the cloud provider will normally automatically decrease it for you as well. If you look at answer B, which we know is not the answer, since we know the answer is A here, scalable networking. So in the cloud, yes, we do have that benefit. You've got that benefit of a lot of things in the cloud. You know, everything in the cloud is scalable. This can be vertical, it can be horizontal if you guys know scaling. So I have the ability to go and increase my networking in the cloud. Yes, that is a benefit. It's a lot quicker and it's a lot easier to go and do the cloud. And quite frankly, it's also cheaper. Answer C, hybrid deployment. It's also got to do with cloud, but it's got nothing to do with this question. Hybrid deployment is usually when you've got something on premises, some sort of infrastructure on premises. This could potentially be your Active Directory server, your Exchange server, your SharePoint, anything like that. And at the same time, you or this company have acquired cloud now. You've got the same component in the cloud, and you've synchronized these two with one another. So a very good popular example would of course be Active Directory. So you or your client's company have now acquired on-premises Active Directory, or you still have it. Most companies already have it. And at the same time, you now have cloud Active Directory, and you have synchronized these two with one another. It's got nothing to do though with adjusting your resources dynamically. Answer D, metered connection. Something I did accidentally mention earlier. So earlier, if you guys paid attention, you would have heard me say everything in the cloud is billed per minute. You only pay for what you use. If you don't use something, you don't pay for that something. Unlike the benefits we've got on premises. On premises, whether you're using something or not, you're paying for it. So if you need a server, you've got to go and buy and build that server. And then afterwards, if that server is just idling there or you turn it off, guess what? You're still paying for that server. In a cloud, though, that is not the case. So in a cloud, if you don't need a server, you turn off that server. And if you turn it off, guess what? You're not using it, which means you're not paying for it. So metered connection means you're paying by the minute. You pay per minute. It sounds expensive, guys, but trust me, usually it works you cheaper. It works you out way cheaper in most cases. So the answer remains A, folks. Question 28. You want to prevent an unauthorized host from connecting to the network via Ethernet. Which of the following is a layer 2 access control you should implement? And I want two answers from you guys. You can see there I said choose two. So I need a layer 2 access control method, and this is specifically for Ethernet. Remember guys, Ethernet is cables. It's not limited to a specific kind of cable, so it's not just LAN cables. This could be fiber optic cable, it can be coaxial cable, it can be Cat5, Cat6, Cat7, Cat8. All of that falls under the umbrella which we call Ethernet. If that does not make sense to you guys, please go check lesson, I think it's lesson 16 on my channel, lesson 16 of the Network Plus course. That lesson is specifically about Ethernet standards, where I explain all the different kinds of Ethernet standards you get, and just in general what Ethernet actually is. So if you'd like to know more about this, please check out specifically lesson 16 in my playlist. Anyway, so we are trying to add some form of security specifically for cables, and it's got to be a layer 2 access control. So layer 2 is the switching layer, guys. We call that the switching layer. It's the layer on which switches work and all that kinds of stuff. So looking at answer A, yes, that is a form of network security, but that is encryption specifically for wireless. And the question specifically states we are working with what? Ethernet. In other words, cables, guys. So A is completely out because that is wireless security. It's got nothing to do with this question. Answer B, access control lists, which we call ACL for short. Yes, that indeed is one of the answers. Access control lists can be configured in multiple places, and one of the most common places we configure this, guys, is at layer 2 on a switch. Now, I've mentioned this before in this video. Access control list controls the flow of your traffic, very much like a firewall. So depending on where you are coming from, or where you're trying to go to, or both for that matter, it'll either allow your traffic or block your traffic. So B is one of the two answers. Looking at answer C, a captive portal. Once again, that is a form of security, but once again, that is for wireless, guys. So the place you'll most commonly see a captive portal, keeping in mind it's not limited to this, is something like a coffee shop. So sometimes if you go to like a coffee shop, you'll find these days they'll say there's free Wi-Fi or free internet. And you'll think, oh great, I can just go and connect. And no, you cannot. You'll notice normally these folks want you to go and buy something in a coffee shop first before you'll gain internet access. Then they'll give you like a password or a voucher. Most commonly it'll be a voucher. So if you try and piggyback or try and jump on their Wi-Fi, it's going to ask you for a code of sorts. And that code is on what? It is on a captive portal. So this is something we use on a wireless network. Most likely on a public wireless network where we want to give people vouchers and stuff like that. So that leaves us with answer D. Without explaining it, we already know that's the answer since we know we have to choose two. And we know it's not A or C. So the only one that's left is D. And that is indeed correct. Port security. Something we have indeed actually explained in this video before, guys. Port security is something we'll normally go and configure on a switch. Once again, a switch is on layer 2 once again. And a switch is used for Ethernet. So if you were to go and plug out a network cable on my switch, on its own, that's not going to do anything. If you plug that same cable back into that same port, it's not going to do anything. That component will just be back up and running again. But if you plug a cable out on my switch and you plug something else into that port, port security is going to kick in because it's going to detect that this is a different device. So it can either just send an alert to the admins, which is not something we normally do because that's not very secure, or it can send an alert and shut down the port. So normally I did that one. I would normally go and shut down the port and have it send me an alert so I can go and check it and see what the heck is going on here. So folks, the answer is B and D. Question 29. Which of the following is used to track and document various types of known vulnerabilities? Alright guys, so looking at answer A, least privilege. That's got to do with security. Actually, all 4 of these answers have got to do with security. I did that on purpose to throw a spanner in the works. I don't want to give you guys this on a silver platter. So least privilege is a golden rule in IT, and it means not to give someone or something more permissions or privilege or access than what they need to achieve a task or a goal. And this normally actually even includes yourself. So it's got to do with permissions, giving someone access or denying them access. It's got nothing to do with vulnerabilities, or should I say, documenting various types of known vulnerabilities. It's just to prevent people from having too much access. That's what answer A is about, so it's not the answer. Answer B, 0 day. So a 0-day attack or a 0-day exploit, or just in general, the term 0 day in IT normally means it's a weakness of some kind that was discovered today, like probably today. And whoever discovered it, they're either going to sell it to the highest bidder, or they're going to try and exploit this vulnerability today while it's still hot and fresh, and while there's no patches or fixes or remedies for this specific vulnerability. But it does not document the vulnerabilities. It's just discovering a brand spanking new vulnerability. That's what 0 day is. It's to discover one and then taking advantage of that opportunity before they go and fix it. It's not to document it. So answer B is not entirely correct. Answer C, CVE. That, folks, is short for common vulnerabilities and exposures. Believe it or not, that actually is the answer in this scenario. So it's a publicly accessible catalog of known cybersecurity vulnerabilities. So anybody of the general public can actually go and access this. It's a list of common names for publicly known security vulnerabilities in software and hardware, and each vulnerability is assigned a unique ID, making it easier for organizations to share information, prioritize fixes, and protect their systems. So basically in a company, if you are the IT professional, which is going to be you guys one day, if it's not you already, you can use this list, from the CEV to coordinate efforts to prioritize and address vulnerabilities, to improve the security of their systems, and to determine where to focus security measures. So yes, folks, the answer is indeed CVE, which is answer C. Answer D, which is incorrect. Penetration testing is to check for weaknesses, but it's not necessary to document the weaknesses. So penetration testing is normally when someone in cybersecurity, a white hat hacker, not a black hat hacker, someone that is there to protect a company's security. So you are going to get hired to legally break into a company to check for any weaknesses. And should you get into that company, you've got to give them a report of sorts of how you got in, and you need to give them a list of solutions, so that it doesn't happen again. Rather pay someone to hack you and then have them give you a report than having someone hack you for whatever giggles they might have and whatever they might want behind you. That's not going to be nice. So CVE, folks, is the answer. Question 30. You need to ensure outside users are not able to telnet into any of the servers at the data center. Which of the following ports should be blocked? So basically what I'm asking you guys here in a nutshell is I want to see if you guys know which port number is the port number for telnet. So we need to block the port number for telnet. Short and sweet. Now, the list I've given you guys there is obviously a very short list. It might look long and intimidating to you guys, but believe it or not, it's a very short list. All of those port numbers are known as common port numbers, otherwise also known as well-known port numbers. You guys would be wise to go and familiarize yourself with well-known port numbers or common port numbers. I can guarantee you this is going to be asked in the exam. You'll get at least 1 or 2 questions about common port numbers in the exam. So familiarize yourself with the common port numbers, know what they are, and know what they're used for. So I'm going to explain each of these very briefly to you guys. Answer A, 22, that is SSH. That is to go and remotely connect to something via console, something like PuTTY, but it's an encrypted view. Answer B is Telnet. That is actually the answer now. So Telnet and SSH is very much the same thing. It's pretty much almost identically the same thing. The only main difference here is SSH is an encrypted view of doing that. Answer C, 53, that is DNS. In other words, to convert IPs to names and names to IPs. It does name resolution and all that jazz. Answer D, HTTP, Hypertext Transfer Protocol. Normal web browsing in clear text. Answer E, for free. That is HTTPS. In other words, Hypertext Transfer Protocol Secure. It's also web browsing, but that is the encrypted view of web browsing. And then lastly, folks, answer F, 3389. That is RDP, to go and do remote desktop protocol. So that's to go and remotely connect to another machine or another server, and you can actually go and control that machine or server. So the answer is answer B, folks. That is Telnet. Question 31. When accessing corporate network resources, users are required to authenticate to each application they try to access. Which of the following concepts does this best represent? Now, folks, if we look at answer A there, SSO, that is pretty much the exact opposite of what the question states. So for those of you not familiar with SSO, it is short for single sign-on. So that means it's going to ask the user or you to sign in. So you are going to have to prove you are who you claim to be. But generally, it's only going to do this once. So single sign-on is normally intended to make people more productive, so they spend less time, logging in. If they're going to be spending less time logging in, they can be more productive. At least that's the idea. So if they open a browser session, for instance, and they want to log into something of 365, yes, it is going to ask them for a username and a password. But it's only going to ask it once while that session is open. And if they open another tab, and it's got something to do with 365, it's not going to ask them to log back in again. So that means the user is more productive, and they're going to spend less time logging in. It is not, however, the answer to this question. The question specifically states the users are being required to authenticate every time they try to access an application or something. What do we call that? Is it answer B, zero trust? Yes, folks, that actually is the answer in this scenario. Zero trust is something we normally discuss in security. So this is something you guys will especially touch on more in your Security Plus course. So if anyone is going to be doing Security Plus, please pay attention to zero trust. I can guarantee you that's going to be in that exam as well. So some of these topics do overlap with A+, some of them overlap with Security Plus, and some of them are actually in all three courses and all three exams. So zero trust means we trust nobody and nothing. We want to make sure that everybody has to prove their identity around every freaking corner. So the benefits of this is your environment is a heck of a lot more secure. A couple of obvious drawbacks is your people are going to be less productive because they're going to be spending so much time logging in the whole freaking time. Alright, so we already know the answer is B here, folks. VPN has got nothing to do with this security here. VPN is a form of remote connectivity, specifically a secure, encrypted remote connection. You can think of this as digitally teleporting yourself to the office. So if I'm sitting at home and I VPN to the office, it'll be as if I am at the office. So physically, yes, I'm still sitting at home. But digitally speaking, everything I could normally see and do when I was at the office, you can see and do that now at the office. It is a double-edged sword though, folks. So anything that normally applied to you at the office, good and bad, will apply to you. So if there were certain things you were blocked from doing in the office, let's say going to YouTube and Facebook and things like that, guess what? It's going to apply to you now as soon as you VPN to the office. Answer D, role-based access control, better known as RBAC for short. So that is privilege. That is something you can go and configure on premises. You can go and configure that in the cloud. But generally, that exact term is something we use in the cloud, specifically on Azure. So it's the privilege or the permissions we give to someone's user account. What can they do and what can they not do? What can they see and what can they not see? Anyway, folks, the answer is B. Question 52. What is the tool in the image used for? Alright guys, I've got a nice big fat image here for you guys. Have a nice look at it, because I'm going to make it smaller in just a bit so I can make room for my answers here. So have a look at it. Hopefully it looks familiar to you guys. Alright, so I'm going to make it a bit smaller here. I need some room. Alright, so there's a couple of answers for you guys. So looking at that tool, if you guys need to see it bigger, you can just go and rewind a bit there. What is that tool used for? Is it answer A? You connect it to the end of a copper cable to detect and measure electrical current flowing through it. No, guys. Answer A is a multimeter. That picture is not a multimeter. We don't use that to check voltage and current and stuff like that. So it's not answer A. Answer B. You place this tool at one end of the wire. It generates a tone that can be detected at the other end. Yes, that indeed is the answer. So that picture, folks, is a toner probe. It's also known as a tone generator. So if you need to trace a cable in the walls, in the ceiling, or let's just say on the other end where this cable comes out, there's a lot of cables, you're not sure which is which. What you can do is you can go and hook up this toner probe to the one side of the cable, and when you hold the little wand, the little orange thing to the other side of the cable, it's actually going to generate a tone for you when you hold this little wand near the cable. You don't even need to touch it, which is why you're able to trace cables through the wall and through the ceiling. So if you hold a little wand near the wall where the cable is, it's going to start generating a tone, and then you know, aha, that's where the cable is. Now, as for answer C and D, we know that's not the answer. The answer is B here. C says you can connect this to the end of a fiber cable to measure the length of the cable run. No, guys, we discussed that a couple of questions ago. That is something we use to check where the cable is broken and how long it is. It's got to do with fiber cables. It's absolutely not the tool we see in this image. Answer D. You use it to connect a bulk cable to a keystone connector. You use it to punch down into the correct receptacle on the connector. Now, guys, that is a punch down tool. Something we've also shown you guys a couple of images ago. So if you go back a couple of questions in this video, I had a picture for you guys of a punch down tool. So that punch down tool is normally something you'll go and use behind a patch panel or in a little wall box. So if you look at something like a normal LAN cable, which has got 8 little wires inside of it, those 8 little wires, they've got to be punched in behind the patch panel or into the little wall box. Now, if you really don't have a punch down tool for whatever reason, you can always go and use a very, very small flat screwdriver. That'll also get the job done. It's a little bit harder to use, but it does work. Question 33. You have been tasked at BurningIceTech to set aside addresses in a DHCP pool so that certain servers always receive the same address. Alright guys, so just a quick recap. DHCPs, their purpose is to issue random IP addresses to devices on a network. This can be a desktop, a laptop, or even a server in this case. It can be phones, tablets, pretty much anything on the network that is set to dynamic. That something will receive a random IP address from the DHCP. Now in this scenario, we've got a couple of servers. They do need to receive an IP address from the DHCP, not something we normally do. Normally we allocate IP addresses statically to a server. But in this instance, the servers do need to receive an IP from the DHCP. But we need the servers to always receive the same IP addresses from the DHCP. How do we achieve that? Which of the following should you configure, in other words? Is it the scopes? Now guys, the scopes is also known as the range. So that is how many IP addresses the DHCP has and where they start and where they end. It's got nothing to do with allocating specific IPs to specific devices or not allocating them or anything like that. It's got nothing to do with that. So all 4 of these answers has got to do with DHCP, that I can tell you, but it's not all of them have got to do with setting aside addresses. Looking at answer B, reservations. Yes, folks, that is the answer. So on a DHCP, you can actually even sometimes do this on the router version of DHCPs. Not all of them have this function, but some of them at least do. So on most DHCPs, especially on the server versions of DHCP, you can create something called a reservation. That means the same IP address will be dished out to the same device every day over and over. The way we do that is on the DHCP, you go and type in the MAC address of this device. Some of you guys might notice it's the physical address or its hardware address. So it's got multiple names. You can call it a MAC address, physical address, or its hardware address. So you're going to type that in on the DHCP. Then you're going to choose the IP address that needs to be dished out to the same device every day. And voila, this literally takes like 1 or 2 seconds. It's very quick and easy. So the answer is B. Looking at answer C, exclusions. Now, exclusions is when you want to exclude a certain IP in a scope from being dished out. So if your scope / your range has about 100 IP addresses that it can be dished out, and there's 1 or 2 IP addresses in that range that you do not want to have dished out, exclusions is how you're going to go about doing that. So this is often because those IP addresses have been statically allocated to something, most likely a server or two. Now, we don't want those IPs being dished out to other devices if they've been statically allocated to devices. Otherwise, you're going to have yourself an IP address conflict, and that's going to end up kicking both devices off the network. Not something we want. So we're going to go and create an exclusion to exclude those IPs that you've allocated statically to other devices. The last answer there, leases. That is how long an IP address is valid for before it expires. Now, static IPs, they don't expire. Whatever IP address you give to a device, it will have that IP address and it's going to stay on that IP address until you or someone goes back onto that device one day. This can even be years afterwards, and then you go and change it. As for dynamic IPs, you'll normally get it from your DHCP. It's going to last you a certain amount of time. It's going to eventually expire, and it's going to stop working. You will no longer be able to access resources, including the internet, once that IP address expires. How long is the lease, you ask? Well, guys, that's random. Depends on your company. The default period the DHCP will have is 8 days, but nobody leaves it on 8 days. We always go and change it. So most companies will put this on about roughly 24 hours. Question 34. Which of the following network topologies has a single point of failure? Alright guys, so all 4 of the options you see below, all 4 of them are network topologies. If you look at answer A, a mesh topology, that is in fact the most expensive topology you can find. So in that configuration, every device, whether they be PCs or servers, every device is connected to every other device. So this is not something you'll find in a normal office environment. This is something you'll normally encounter in a server room environment where we need high availability, fault tolerance, redundancy, and all of that. So every device is connected to every other device. There's actually a formula you can go and use to work that out. So if you guys checked my Network Plus course, you would know what that formula is. I did do a video on that where I show you guys what the formula is. I think the video is called Network Topologies, if I'm not mistaken. So if you're not sure about network topologies, that should be one of the videos in the beginning of my playlist, somewhere around the beginning. Just go check that out. You'll see there's a formula to work out how many cables you would need in an actual mesh topology. Now, it does not have a single point of failure. That's one of the benefits of a mesh topology. It is extremely reliable, has no real points of failure. Drawback is it's extremely expensive to go and implement. If you look at something like a ring topology, it does not really have a single point of failure, but it does have points of failure, so it's very cheap to go and implement, but it's also very difficult to go and maintain. So if one of the lines between the machines goes down, then everybody's going to be down. So yeah, ring, very cheap, very unreliable, generally very slow as well. So that is all technology we don't really use anymore. Funny enough, the other day I did actually see a ring topology, so you do still get them, but they are exceptionally rare. It's basically extinct. Answer C, a star topology. That is the most common kind of topology you guys will encounter in most businesses and most home environments. And it does in fact have a single point of failure. So every device will have its own network cable that connects to the same central device, and that central device would normally be something like a switch. So the switch is essentially your single point of failure. So if one of the network cables, goes offline, breaks, or something happens to one of them, or one of the machines goes offline, then, well, just that cable or just that machine will be affected. But if the single point in the middle, being the switch, if that were to fail, then the whole network would be down. Everybody would be affected. The benefits is it's very quick and easy to go and change that, guys. A switch is not always that expensive, unless this happens to be a very expensive managed switch. But your average switch, generally they're not that expensive. You can literally just go and unplug the old switch, which is now faulty, plug a new one in, and you can be back up and running potentially in a couple of mere minutes. So yeah, it's not always that difficult to go and get that back up and running again. And it gives you a lot of reliability. I mean, for the most part, it gives you pretty much a lot of reliability, this topology. So the answer is C here. Answer D, hybrid. That is a mix of something. So in this scenario, it'll be a mix of 2 different kinds of networks. It might be a mix of a star and a mesh. So maybe the part of the network that is mesh, that'll be where your servers are located. And then the part of the network where you have a star, that'll be where your normal desktops and laptops and that kinds of stuff can be encountered. Anyway, folks, the answer is C. Question 55. You need to troubleshoot a NIC. I hope you guys remember what a NIC is. That is Network Interface Card. So like I said in the beginning of this video, you would be wise to familiarize yourself with all the abbreviations because you're going to be expected to know that in this exam. So any abbreviation you see in the slides, in your manual, or in any video, if you don't remember what it is or if you don't know what it means, make a note. Make sure you know that before you go and attempt this exam, folks. Anyway, so it says you need to troubleshoot a NIC that was recently installed by someone else. You decide to ping the local loopback address. Which of the following is a valid IPv4 loopback address? Now, which one out of these ones down below, guys, is a loopback? That's actually all I want to know. So out of the ones down below, which one is a loopback address specifically for IP version 4? Now, in case you're wondering, yes, you do get a loopback address for IP version 6 as well, and that one is not listed down below. So answer A, that is not your answer. Answer A is, for the most part, a private IP address, and it's by default seen as a Class A IP address. So it doesn't mean it's set in stone, obviously that's going to be determined by your subnet mask, but by default, 10.something.something.something is seen as a Class A, until you go and manually change it to something else using the subnet. Answer B, 127.0.0.1. Yes, folks, that indeed is a loopback. It's the one and only loopback IP address for IP version 4. It is used to test your own TCP IP stack, and it's used to check if your own network card is essentially working. To check if your own network configuration is working and all that kinds of stuff. So that's the answer. Answer C is also, for the most part, a private IP address, but that is a Class B IP address by default. Once again, only by default. It's not set in stone, folks. You can always go and change this afterwards with the subnet. But by default, 172.16.something.something is seen as Class B. The last one there is by default seen as Class C, believe it or not. So 192.168.0 would normally be seen as a Class C by default until you, of course, once again go and change it to something else using the subnet mask. So it's seen as Class C. It's also seen as a private IP address normally. So the answer remains B, folks. Question 56. You have been tasked by BurningIceTech to implement network segmentation. Oh boy, what is that? Which of the following benefits does it provide? Alright, folks, so network segmentation is to basically subdivide your network. So if I have to thumbsuck it and give you guys an example, I'm not sure if you guys have ever seen a huge ship, whether it be a military ship or a civilian ship, especially the military ships. They've got compartments. So you'll find that as you walk on the ship, or even on submarines, they've got like a watertight door. They've got small little compartments, and there's normally like 2 doors on most compartments. Could be more, could be less. But every one of these compartments can potentially be sealed if need be. So if this submarine or this military ship or the civilian ship, happens to hit something or gets hit by something and there's a leak of sorts in that area, now obviously water is going to come flooding in there and that could potentially sink the ship or the submarine. So to avoid that from happening, they can seal that compartment because the doors are watertight. So it's got proper doors. They literally just seal those doors, and that compartment is basically sealed off from the rest of the ship or the submarine. Pretty cool, right? The water is not going to be able to get into the rest of the ship or the submarine. It's sealed off. And if another place on the ship or the submarine happens to get damaged, they can just seal that off once again. So that is called segmentation in real life. That's a real life example of where we do segmentation to avoid, a bigger disaster. Yes, we've got a small little problem there now. It's obviously one room is now dead to us. We can't go and use it. But at least we're not going to have to lose the whole ship or the whole submarine here. So it's to prevent bigger damage. We are going to experience some level of damage, but it's to prevent it from getting out of hand. It's to allow us to have some level of control over the situation. Now we can do that same concept in IT, folks, with network segmentation. It's to basically block a hacker or attacker or some sort of a malicious user into one small part of your network. So instead of just having everything on one big network, which is very unsecure, if someone or something happens to get onto my network, let's say they happen to penetrate my security, they will be stuck in one small section on my network. Hence the name, network segmentation. So we want to basically prevent this person from seeing stuff they're not supposed to and doing stuff they're not supposed to. So looking at the answers again, which of the following benefits does it provide? Does it provide us with high availability through redundancy? No, folks. Redundancy is to make sure something is still available. We want to prevent the damage from getting worse. So it's got nothing to do with that. Answer B, security through isolation. Exactly, guys. That is the answer. So by doing segmentation, we've got our network in lots of small little segments, and if someone happens to penetrate my security, they'll be stuck in one of these small little segments. Isolation, in other words. The same would have happened on a ship or a submarine. So we're isolating that room, we're sealing it off from the rest of the ship, and obviously the water is not going to be able to penetrate or get into the rest of the ship. It's isolation. So the answer here, folks, is B. Answer C, reliability through fault tolerance, is very much the same thing as A. It's pretty much the exact same thing. So redundancy and fault tolerance is pretty much the same thing. Is to make sure something is still reliable, and if something happens that the service or whatever is not unavailable. Answer D, also similar to A and B, just in a different way. Answer D is also known as NIC teaming, and in some cases even load balancing. So link aggregation is when you go and combine two or more network cards to act as one. And normally we'll go and take those two or more network cards and we'll link them with network cables to the exact same switch. So the switch that you would have connected to normally with one cable, we're going to go and take two cables now, or even potentially more, and we're going to go and use all of that for the same link. So if we've got two network cards, each of them will have a network cable, and those two cables will go into the exact same switch. So that is called link aggregation. It's also known as load balancing to a certain extent, and it's also known as NIC teaming. It's got a few other names as well, folks. So it does give you a certain sense of high availability and redundancy, but it's got nothing to do with isolation or network segmentation. Question 57. You need to implement a physical security control to prevent attackers from gaining access to a network closet. Which of the following would fall into that description? So it's a physical security control that we need to go and implement. Is it IP cameras? Now, IP cameras is physical, but it's not going to physically stop these perpetrators. We'll be able to see them come in, and we can potentially identify them, but it's not going to prevent them. It's just going to discourage them. It's going to discourage them from coming in, but it cannot physically stop them from coming in. If they want to come in, they can still come in. Answer B, proximity readers. Yes, folks, that is a physical security control, and that is indeed the answer. So proximity readers normally works with cards. So how it works is you would need to have a special card on you, and this card just needs to be near the reader. It doesn't even have to touch the reader. You don't need to insert it in the reader. You can even have it in your pocket in some cases. As long as it's on you or very near you, when you go near that reader, it's going to allow you to go in. It's going to open the door for you. But if you don't have that card, the door is not going to open and you're not going to be granted access. So it's going to physically stop you or someone until you've got one of these little cards. So proximity readers, yes, that is the answer. CCTVs, that's pretty much the same answer as A. IP cameras, that's a form of cameras that keeps an eye on people, but it does not prevent them from doing stuff. It just discourages, I suppose. CCTV, same thing, guys. It's the exact same thing. Answer D, motion sensors. Once again, that's not going to stop people. So just like the cameras, you can discourage them, but it's not going to stop them. So a motion sensor will allow you to know that someone is in there, that they're busy up with some sort of shenanigans, but it in no way or form stops them from doing it in the first place. So the only answer here that can physically stop them is answer B. Question 58. One of the users in a company called BurningIceTech logs a ticket and reports that they are unable to print. The user's colleagues are, however, able to print to the same shared printer. Which of the following should be the first question you ask? Alright, so they've given us a bit of information there. They said the colleagues, they are able to print to the exact same printer, and it's a shared printer. So looking at answer A, is the printer powered up? I feel that's not the answer. I can tell you guys that's not the answer, because if the power was not on, the colleagues would not be able to print. The question specifically says the colleagues are able to print to this printer. So if you think about it, if it was off, they would not be able to print. So it's not A. Answer B. Are there any errors on the printer display? Once again, remember, your colleagues are able to print. So if there was an error, let's say it was a paper jam, or the ink is finished, or the cable is unplugged, or whatever, the colleagues would not be able to print. So it's not answer B. Answer C. Is the user able to access any network resources? Yes, folks, that is the answer. because all the other people can print, and this is a shared printer, so it's on the network. You're going to be printing through it via the network. So you need to go and double check if this person actually has access to the network to begin with, because that could be the problem here. It's not the printer that's the issue, it's the machine that's the issue, or maybe the connection between that machine and the printer. There's a network related issue from that person's machine. Answer D, we obviously know that's not the answer since I said it's C. Answer D says, does the printer have toner? Toner, for you guys that don't know, is the ink that this printer uses. It's a powder-based ink that laser printers use. And once again, if there was no toner, the colleagues would not be able to print. They are able to print, so we know it's not the toner. The answer remains C. Question 59. You are receiving multiple comments from several users who are unable to reach a particular website. Which of the following commands would provide the best information about the path taken across the network to this website? Alright, so looking at the commands down below, folks, which one of these 4 commands will give you information about the path taken to get to the website? Or at least that your machine is trying to use to get to the website. Is it answer A, trace it? Yes, guys, trace it is a tool we normally go and use in command prompt to go and check where the problem might lie. So if your internet is not very stable, or if you're unable to access a certain website, trace it is something we'll go into command prompt. You're going to go and type it in, followed by a space, and then the IP address or the name of the site. And that's going to go and trace it up to a maximum of 30 hops. Normally on average it's going to be about 10 hops. And it's going to show you exactly what the latency is to each of these hops, what the IP address of each of these hops is, and if it's actually responding. So somewhere along the line, it's probably going to drop, and then you can see, this is the culprit. This is the problem, when it comes to getting to the website. It might not be you. It might not even be the website. It's something between you and the website. Something on the pathway. Some router, perhaps, that's offline and unavailable. Now, just a note, guys, trace earth and trace route is very much the same thing. They're almost identical. The only main difference between trace earth and trace route is trace earth is a Windows tool. It's something we use in command prompt. It's for Windows. And trace route is something we'll normally go and use on Mac and Linux. I did display that to you guys earlier in the video as well. So we spoke about trace route earlier in the video. I can't remember what question number that was. But trace route, that is more for Linux and Mac. Does the same thing though. And trace earth is more for Windows. That's the main difference. But other than that, they do the same thing. Alright, so we know the answer is A. Ping, in case you guys were wondering what that command does, I think you guys probably know, is to test connectivity to a remote host. It's going to send 4 packets of data to that host, and if your configuration is correct and your link is up, that machine will reply 4 times. It's going to send all 4 packets of data back. So we want to see all 4 packets of data come back, but at the same time, we also want to see them come back in a timelessly manner. So they need to reply in a reasonable time frame. It doesn't help they come back, but it takes forever to come back. That means there's some sort of latency on your network. It could be that it's too far away or something is causing latency. If you do get packets back, but maybe it's not all 4, maybe it's just 3 of them, that means you've got the right configuration, but something is causing interference. You now are experiencing what we call packet loss. And it's up to you to go and figure out why that might be. Most commonly, this will be caused by interference. In other words, EMI or RFI, some sort of interference in your cable. Looking at answer C, Telnet. That is to go and remote connect to something, probably like a router, for instance. And it's normally done via a command line interface. You're not going to be doing this in a graphical interface. It's normally in a command line interface. And most commonly, we'll go and use something like PuTTY to do this. It's not limited to that. So you're going to go and type in Telnet, followed by space, the IP address of the destination device that you want to go to, and it's going to ask you for a username and a password to make sure you are who you claim to be, and that you're allowed to go and connect to this specific device. From there, you would be able to go and configure this device. But it's all in command line interface. So if you are connecting to a router somewhere, you need to be familiar with the commands of that router. So if it's a Cisco router, you need to know Cisco commands. If it's an HP router, you need to know HP commands. The same can be said about Huawei and all the other brands. So you need to be familiar with the commands of that respective router or whatever it is that you're telnetting into. Now, it's worth noting that Telnet is actually very unsecure these days. We don't really use it anymore because it's clear text, which means it's unencrypted. These days, it's more common to see people using something called SSH. It's essentially the same thing, it's just encrypted. The last answer there, folks, D, ipconfig. That is a command you'll normally go and type into command prompt, and it's going to show you that specific machine's networking configuration. The very, very basics of your network configuration. It's going to show you IP address, your subnet mask, maybe your default gateway, and that's about it. You're going to see very basic information about that specific machine's network configuration. If you want to see more, you can go type the exact same command followed by a / and the word all. It's going to show you the same information, but a lot more information, folks. Question 40. You have verified that a recent loss of network connectivity to multiple workstations is due to a faulty Cat6a cable in the server room wall. Which of the following tools can you use to locate its physical location within the wall? Alright, folks, so if you paid attention in some of the earlier questions, you would actually know what the answer is. So the further we go in these videos, we're bound to start double covering, some of these topics. It was either an answer in a previous question, or it was something mentioned in a previous question. It's going to happen. The more questions we cover, we are going to start seeing some overlap. So if you guys paid attention when it came to the tools in a previous question, you would know which tool has the ability to go and trace a cable in the wall. Is it answer A, a multimeter? No, guys. A multimeter is something we'll use on copper cables, and it's to go and check the current through that cable to see if there is any electricity in it, what the watts is, what the amps is, and just in general, to measure electricity, resistance, and things like that. It's got to do with electricity, it's got to do with copper cables, but it's got nothing to do with locating a cable. Answer B, a punch-down tool, something we did discuss way in the beginning of the video. That is something you'll use on copper cables, specifically LAN cables, the ones that's got 8 little wires, and that allows you to punch down the 8 little wires into something like a wall box or behind a patch panel. It's got nothing to do with locating a cable. Answer C, a cable tester. That is something you'll use on a LAN cable or an old telephone cable to test if it's working, if it's configured correctly, and if it's working, if any of the wires are down. The last answer is the only one that's left here, and that is the answer, folks. Answer D is a toner probe, also known as a tone generator. So you hook this up to one end of the cable. It's got like a little machine, and then you've got this little wand that you can hold near the cable, and it's going to generate a tone once the wand is near the cable. So this will allow you to trace the cable through the walls, in the ceiling, and on the other side, if that cable happens to come out where there's a lot of cables and you're not sure which is which, you can use this to figure out which cable is which without having to unplug them. So the answer is D, folks. Question 41. You are busy performing a wireless survey in the office and you discover a device that was not installed by your networking team. This is an example of which of the following threats. Is it blue snarfing? Now that's something I have not mentioned in this video yet. So blue snarfing is when I take advantage of your Bluetooth. So if you've got Bluetooth, I can go and hack you via your Bluetooth, on your laptop, your desktop, your phone. So be careful leaving Bluetooth on your device, guys. You'll find if you come to me, you'll find that Bluetooth is always turned off on my laptop. It's always turned off on my phone and my tablet. So unless I specifically intend on using it in that exact moment, I'm not going to have it on. I'm going to have it turned off. So be very careful of Bluetooth, folks. Answer B, brute force. That is a password attack. A brute force is probably the most dangerous kind of password attack you can get. So that's me guessing your password. It's not something we'll normally do as a human being because that's not feasible. Normally, we'll go and use software to try and guess your password. So the longer your password is, the longer it's going to take me to crack that password. And obviously, you'll also want to go and use what we call lockout policies. So if I get your password wrong 3 times or 4 times or 5 times, it's going to lock the account or the device, or it's going to time out the account or the device. So something that's very good to use for brute force attacks is long passwords and account lockout policies. But it's got nothing to do with a device being installed on a network. Brute force is something you do. It's not a device. Same with blue snarfing. Looking at answer C, a rogue access point. So that's what AP stands for. It's for access point. Yes, guys, the answer is a rogue access point. So if there's a device on your network and you know it wasn't you that installed this, it wasn't your team that installed this, chances is it's a rogue access point or a rogue router or something along those lines. It's something rogue. So in this case, it happens to be a rogue access point. Some weasel, somebody doesn't work for you, or maybe it's a naughty employee, they brought their own access point to the office. Maybe they want to extend the Wi-Fi network for some reason. The last answer there being D is obviously not the answer since we know it's C. So the last one is distributed denial of service. It's not software per se. It's a special kind of attack that takes place normally on a server or a website in most cases. And that's when we hit that website or server with so much traffic to the point where it cannot cope with the load, it's going to either time out or it's going to crash. So if there's some sort of server or website you don't like, you can go and use a distributed denial of service attack on it, and it's going to bring it down or it's going to cause it to crash. Question 42. You have been called into BurningIceTech to troubleshoot a connectivity issue. You determine that the IP address of a number of workstations is 169.254.0.0 with a / side notation of 16. And the workstations cannot access the internet. Which of the following should you check to resolve the problem? Now, if you folks look at the IP address that I gave you guys in the question, that alone should actually tell you what the answer is. But, maybe you guys don't know, so let's go through it anyway. So which of the following should you check to resolve the problem? Do you guys think it is a NIC failure? It could be, it is possible. But why it is not a NIC failure though is because if you look at the question, it says a number of workstations. Now, if it was just one workstation that was experiencing this issue, yes, it could potentially be a NIC failure. But the fact that the question says a number of workstations, that leads us to believe that it's not the NIC. What's the chances of multiple PCs having their network cards fail at the exact same time? That is very unlikely, guys. If you look at that IP address, folks, is known as a PIPA. It means you don't actually have an IP address. So if you have a device like a laptop or a desktop that's set to dynamic, that means it's supposed to get an IP address from the DHCP. Now, if it's unable to get an IP address from the DHCP for whatever reason, this could be because the cable is unplugged or a faulty network card, maybe the Wi-Fi signal is too low. Heck, it can even be something as simple as the IP addresses have ran out. That can actually happen. Now, whatever the reason might be, if you're unable to get an IP address, you will receive what we call a PIPA. Your IP address, if you go check it, it will be 169.254.something.something. If you look at my question, what was the IP address? It was 169.254.something.something. So a number of devices, a number of computers are reporting, in other words, that they've got a PIPA. So that means they don't have an IP address. So why is it that multiple computers at the same time don't have an IP address? Could it be a network card? No. If it was one network card, that will only affect one machine. And like I said earlier, the chances of multiple machines having a failed network card is very unlikely, folks. So answer A is out. Answer B, misconfigured DNS. That is a server role that converts IPs to names and names to IPs in a nutshell. It does name resolution. So this question talks about nothing regarding name resolution. Nowhere do we mention we're going to try and ping an IP address, but the name does not want to resolve. Nothing like that is mentioned in this question. So it's got nothing to do with DNS. Answer C, default gateway address. So that is something you would normally go and type in or use to get outside of your network into another network, or better yet, onto the internet. So the gateway is the first device, usually the only device you've got to go through to get to the outside world, like the internet. Now, in this question, we mentioned that people don't even have an IP address at all. It's got nothing to do with gateway. So the only answer that's left here, folks, by process of elimination, is answer D, DHCP server. And that actually is the answer. So there's something wrong with the DHCP server. In real life, it can obviously be other things as well. It could be that the DHCP server has ran out of IP addresses. That could be why the answer is DHCP server. Maybe it just ran out of IPs. Could be that it's down. Maybe it's faulty. Maybe it's down for maintenance. Could be a lot of things. The point is, the answer is DHCP. That is where the IP addresses come from, and it's unable to dish out IPs for some apparent reason. Question 43. Looking at the image, which tool is this? I think this is like the third or the fourth time I've done this in this video where I'm giving you guys an example of a tool and you need to identify it. So that tool in the picture, guys, is that a toner probe? Now, a toner probe is also known as a tone generator. I showed you guys one of those a couple of questions ago. So a toner probe is something you would hook up to a cable. It generates a tone, and then the other part of the toner probe, which looks like a magic wand basically, if you hold that near the cable, it's going to generate a tone, which will basically allow you to trace this cable in walls, in the ceiling, and also in the event if you've got lots of cables together and you're not sure which is which, it can allow you to figure out which cable is which. Now that tool in the picture, guys, is not a toner probe. Wire stripper. Now at first glance you might think it's a wire stripper, but it's not, folks. That is not a wire stripper. A wire stripper is not really something you'll see us computer technicians using. We do, but it's rare. So wire strippers are more commonly used by people that work with electrical wires. So that'll probably be someone like an electrician. It's not a wire stripper. Answer C. A cable crimper. Yes, that picture is indeed an example of a cable crimper. Now, most cable crimpers, you'll notice, can crimp RJ45 connectors as well as RJ11 connectors. Not all of them, but most of them. So RJ45 connectors is the main one which we're going to be crimping. That's the only one you guys are going to be using it for. That's your normal LAN cables. So that's your Cat5, Cat5e, Cat6, Cat6a, those kinds of cables. RJ11, in case you guys forgot, is for telephone cables, also known as Cat3, also known as POTS, P-O-T-S, which is short for plain old telephone system. Alright, so we know the answer is C. Answer D, punch down tool. Also a picture I actually showed you guys earlier in this video. So a punch down tool is something you would go and use to punch in the 8 little wires of a network cable into a wall box or behind a patch panel, like I've said so many times before in this video. Alright, moving on to question 44. You need to prevent unauthorized hosts in BurningIceTech from connecting to the network via Ethernet. Which of the following is a layer 2 access control which you can go and implement? Alright folks, we have discussed something very similar on this video before, so I'm not sure if you guys paid attention in this video. So what classifies as layer 2? So if you look at the OSI model, folks, layer 2 is also known as the switching layer. So that's where you'll find devices like switches. So keeping in mind that layer 2 is the switching layer, that might potentially lead you guys to the answer. So we want to prevent unauthorized people from connecting to our network via a LAN cable is what we're saying. So will answer A achieve that? WPA2? No guys, that is wireless encryption. It's for wireless networks. It's got nothing to do with this question because it is for wireless. It's security, yes, it's definitely security, but it's for wireless networks, and we are specifically having an issue here with cables. Is it answer B, port security? Yes, that is actually the answer, guys. So in layer 2, what are we dealing with? Switches. And we want to prevent unauthorized people from having the ability to go and plug a random cable out, plugging themselves into that port, and then gaining access to our network. Port security will achieve exactly that. So port security basically memorizes the MAC address, which you guys also will know as the physical address or the hardware address. It memorizes or remembers the MAC address of the device that's plugged into a port. And if you plug that device out and you plug the same device back in, nothing will happen because it's going to see it's the same MAC address. But if you plug it out and you plug something else into that port, it's going to see, oh, hang on a moment, this is a different MAC address. And something will happen. Something like shutting down the port so people will not gain access. That is why that is the answer here. Answer C, which is a captive portal, that's once again, it is security, but it's for wireless networks. I've mentioned that before in this video. So that is something you'll experience normally like in a coffee shop or some public place. If you try and get onto their free Wi-Fi, they keep saying it's free, but normally it's not. You've got to buy something from their store first before they'll give you access to the internet. You'll normally land on some sort of page first. It's going to ask you for a code. Normally it's like a voucher of some kind. And before they'll give you this voucher, you need to buy something like a cup of coffee. That is a captive portal. Often they'll also make you agree to an acceptable usage policy, which means you cannot use this network for this, you can't use it for that. Please don't use it to do hacking. Please don't use it to do scamming, that kinds of stuff. And then the last answer there, answer D, that is indeed something you'll find on a switch. It is indeed something layer 2, so it is layer 2 security, but it's not going to achieve our goal. Answer D is access control list, which controls the flow of traffic. So it's going to check where you're coming from, digitally speaking, and where you want to go, digitally speaking. But it's not going to solve our problem in terms of preventing someone
from plugging a cable out and plugging themselves back into a port. It's not going to do anything with regards to that. So it's not answer D, folks. So the answer is answer B. And the only other answer here, which is even remotely close, is answer D, but that's still not going to achieve our goal. Question 45. You are setting up a web-based application for BurningIceTech that needs to be continually accessible to end users. So it needs to always be available, no matter what. Which of the following concepts would best ensure this requirement? Is it high availability? Yes, folks, high availability means a server, a website, or a service is always available no matter what. So if this is a server, you'll probably go and make 2 or 3 of the exact same server, clones if you will. This will give you other benefits too, of course, like load balancing, fault tolerance, redundancy, but more importantly, in this specific question, it will allow you to achieve high availability. So God forbid, if something happens to one of your servers, the other remaining servers, which are clones, they will keep on delivering the service that needs to be delivered. Same applies to websites, folks. So if you've got a website or a web application, like this question states, now if that web application is hosted on multiple servers, clone servers, and one of them goes down, well, the web application is not going to become unavailable, guys. It might just be slightly slower, but at no point in time will it be unavailable. So the answer is A. Now, if you're curious what the other 3 answers are, answer B there, cold site, that's a form of backup. It's going to give you redundancy and fault tolerance, but absolutely not high availability. So a cold site, it's a form of backup which you probably intend on never using, so hopefully you will never need to use that. It's generally a lot slower, but it's also a lot cheaper. So if something were to happen to your servers, your web application or whatever, yes, you can go and resort to a cold site backup, but it might take you hours, days, or even weeks to get back up and running. So you're not going to lose your data, no, but it's going to take you a very long time to get back up and running again. You get warm sites and you get hot sites. A warm site is basically the same thing. You know, it's still a form of backup, but you're going to get back up and running quicker. Instead of it taking you days or weeks, it might take you minutes or hours to get back up and running. And a hot site, if that were to be an answer here, it means your backup is available immediately. It was running parallel to your stuff. So that is actually a high availability answer. So if hot site was listed as an answer here, that would have been a possible answer. A hot site does provide high availability because it literally runs parallel to your other servers and stuff. So if the one goes down, the other one will instantly, immediately take over. But it's not an answer here, so we can't choose that. Answer C, snapshots. That is also known as checkpoints. It's a form of backup, most commonly found on Hyper-V hypervisors. So that's something we do with virtual machines. If you've got a virtual machine on Hyper-V, you can go and create a snapshot, which they nowadays call checkpoints. And it's basically like making a backup of your virtual machine. And if you or someone were to go and break something on this virtual machine or do some sort of shenanigans, you can always send this virtual machine back in time. Now, unlike System Restore on Windows, where it only restores the system settings and configurations, a snapshot or a checkpoint literally changes the whole machine back to an earlier state. Everything, including the data. And then the last answer there is something we have explained quite a few times in this video. NIC teaming, also known as link aggregation. So that is when you go and specifically combine 2 or more network cards together to act as one. So if you've got 2 cards in your machine, it does not necessarily mean you've got NIC teaming, because maybe you just want to be on 2 different networks at the same time. But if you've got 2 cards or more and they're on the exact same network at the exact same time and you've linked them together, that is an example of what we call NIC teaming. It gives you also high availability, but only to keep your link up. It does not necessarily keep a web-based application up. So the second best answer here would be NIC teaming. That's why the question said, which of the following concepts would best? The word best is there. So the best answer here would be A, high availability. The second best answer would be NIC teaming. All right, folks, before we move on to the next question, it is time for that game I like to play in some of my videos. So for those of you that's watched some of my other videos, you might know what this game is. So normally at some point in the video, normally somewhere towards the end of a video, I will either give you a hidden word or a phrase. And the idea is for you to make a sentence using this word or phrase. Some sort of creative, funny sentence. You know, you can either just be creative or you can be funny about it. But remember, you need to stick to YouTube's guidelines and their rules. So no swearing, don't be mean, nothing along those lines. Otherwise, the YouTube popo is going to be on our case and we don't want that. That's not going to be nice. So what's going to happen is once we start making these random phrases using this word or the sentence I'm going to give you guys, today's sentence is the elves stole my shoes. I'm choosing elves as my topic for today since I'm making this video during the festive season. So once again, the sentence is the elves stole my shoes. You can either type that sentence as is in the comment section down below, or better yet, make it your own. Make something new with that sentence. You can go and rephrase the sentence or just use the word elves in some sort of creative way. But of course, you need to stick to YouTube's rules. Let's see how funny you guys can be or how creative you guys can be, but also keeping to the rules. So now if anybody else that's new to this channel of mine or new to this video that doesn't know what it's about, if they go and browse the comment section, besides seeing the usual questions, which I obviously will answer, they're also going to see a lot of people mentioning elves or talking about elves stealing shoes. And as you can imagine, that's going to cause massive confusion. It's going to be hilarious. And only if you've watched the video up to this point would you know what the heck is going on. So when they eventually get to like question 46, they'll be like, oh, so that's why people are talking about elves the whole time. And not everybody's going to watch up to question 46. So it's for a small little elite club. Only the people that watched up to this point would know what the heck is going on. So guys, the sentence is the elves stole my shoes. You can either use that sentence and go and rephrase it, or you can just use the word elves and make something creative of that. All right, so moving on to question 46. It has been found that many desktops are being reported as missing or lost at BurningIceTech. Which of the following would best assist in recovering these devices? Is it computer locks? No, guys. Computer locks is a form of security you can go and use of PCs, but that's to prevent it from happening in the first place. It's not going to help you recover the machines. They are already lost or missing. The computer locks is to prevent this from happening in the first place. Answer B, motion detectors. No, folks, that's not going to help you find your machines. It might help to a certain extent to prevent people from taking the machines in the first place if they know there are motion sensors or motion detectors, but it doesn't completely stop them. It's not as effective as computer locks. Computer locks will hopefully stop them in their tracks, hopefully, but if they come with the right tools like a bolt cutter, then it's not going to work, obviously. Motion detectors, yeah, it might inform you someone has been there or that they are there, but it doesn't stop them. And it's most definitely not going to help you find these machines afterwards. In other words, recover them. So it's not answer B. Answer C, security guards. Once again, that is just to discourage people and hopefully stop them from doing this, but it does not help you recover the assets afterwards. A security guard does not recover assets, they just prevent your stuff from going missing in the first place. So the only answer that's left here, once again by process of elimination, is answer D, asset tracking tags. Yes, folks, that is the answer. Asset tracking tags can be used for you to go and find your assets if you've misplaced them, or if they are lost, or if they've gotten stolen, for some apparent reason. So that is the answer here, folks. Question 47. Which of the following should be configured or used to ensure a specific IP address does not get issued by a DHCP? Now, I have not asked this question yet in the video, but I have discussed this topic in this video. So something else we've discussed in this video was reservations. And you can see that's one of the answers down below. So in one of the previous questions, the answer was reservation for something that I asked you guys. And one of the possible answers we had there was exclusions. And I explained to you guys what an exclusion is. So the answer, in case you guys don't know, in this situation is an exclusion. It's not answer A. Answer A is how long an IP address will be valid for. Once it's no longer valid, it expires. And once it expires, you or this user in question will no longer have access to resources, including the internet. Answer B, reservation, is to dish out an IP address. It will, but it's always going to dish out the same IP address to the same device over and over and over. So the most common scenario where I've seen people do this is normally for a printer. A printer generally needs to have the same IP every day because it's going to get mapped to your PC for a certain IP address. Let's say today the printer's IP address is .15. So I install the printer, it's going to be mapped as .15, and when I click on print, it's going to send it to .15. Tomorrow, this printer is going to get a new random IP address from the DHCP, which will not be .15. And when I click on print tomorrow, where is it going to go to? It's going to go to .15. So you see the problem, folks. So what you want to do is you want to have that DHCP dish out .15 to that printer every day, or whatever IP address it had. That is reservation. Exclusion is to exclude a certain IP address from your scope or from your range. So in that range of IP addresses that you're going to be dishing out, let's say it's 100 IPs. In that range of 100 IPs, there is a possibility that maybe you or somebody have assigned one of these IPs to something statically, manually, in other words. Now, if that happens, we don't want to dish out that IP address randomly to some other device, because then you're going to have an IP address conflict. So the IP address where you've assigned it manually, that device is going to get kicked off the network. And the device that received it now automatically, it's also going to get kicked off the network. They're going to basically cancel one another out. Not something we want. So the answer is and remains C. Answer D, DHCP relay. That is something you'll normally put on the edge of your network, guys. So if you happen to have multiple networks and you only have one DHCP, which is on one of these networks, how exactly do you plan on dishing out IPs in the other networks if they need IPs? That is where something like a relay agent is going to come into play. We just call it a DHCP relay. So in one network, you'll have your DHCP, the actual server. And on the edge of your network, you'll have your relay, which is dishing out IPs on behalf of said DHCP into those other networks. Pretty nifty, right? And then the last one there, I think we know what that is. So the DHCP scope, which is also known as the range, is how many IP addresses you've got in your pool, and from where do they start and where does it end. Anyway, so once again, the answer is C, exclusion, folks. Question 48. Which of the following commands can be used to test connectivity to another host or a website? So we want to test connectivity to a remote host or a website, guys. Is it answer A, ipconfig? Now, first of all 4 of these are command prompt commands. ipconfig, like I've said earlier in this video, if you guys paid attention, is to show you this device's basic networking configuration. It will show you the device's IP address, its subnet mask, maybe the default gateway, and that's about it, nothing more. Answer B will show you the exact same stuff, but a little bit more. It's going to show you perhaps the physical address, that's the MAC address, which is also known as the hardware address. It'll show you whether this machine is getting an IP address dynamically or if it's on static. It'll tell you if it has received an IP. It'll tell you if the lease is expired, amongst many other things. So it's the same stuff as answer A, just shows you way more. Answer C, ping. Yes, folks, that is what we use to test connectivity. It'll send 4 packets of data, very small packets of data, to this remote device or website. And if your configuration is correct and everything is up and running, it will reply with all 4 packets of data, hopefully in a timely manner. And then the last one, which is not the answer there, trace it. That is what we use to trace something, but it's not really what we use it for. We normally use it to trace where a problem is on the network. So if your internet is a little spotty, it keeps going on and off, or it's off, or you're struggling to access a website or something, and you want to see where the problem is, if it's inside your network or your environment, or if it's on their end, or if it's somewhere in between, trace it is what one would use to go and check where the problem might be. All right, folks, so the answer there was ping. Question 49. Which of the following port numbers should be closed on the firewall to prevent users from using FTP? Now, for those of you not familiar with FTP, that is File Transfer Protocol. So it's essentially a server online where you can go and upload nonsense and download nonsense. We still use it till this day, but it's being used a lot less these days because we've got other things to our disposal. So if you look at the answers down below, basically what I'm asking you guys here is, what is the port number for FTP? That's all I want to know, is which port number down below is the port number for FTP. Now, all the port numbers that's listed down below are common port numbers, which are also known as well-known port numbers. It's not all the common port numbers or the well-known port numbers. That's just 8 of them. Totally random ones. Now, something I do want to point out, in case you guys don't know, FTP actually has 2 port numbers. Only one of them, though, is listed down below. Maybe now you guys know what the answer is. So looking at the answers down below, is it A, 21? Yes, folks, the first one being 21 is indeed the port number for FTP. Another port number for FTP is actually port number 20. Number 22 there, that is for SSH, Secure Shell. So that's to go and remote connect to something via console view, but in an encrypted view, so it's not in clear text. Port 23 is for Telnet, so that's the exact same thing as SSH, it's just in clear view, so it's unencrypted, it's not very secure, people don't do that much. Port 25 is SMTP, so that's the old school way of sending email. We still use it till this day, but not nearly as much as we used to in the old days. Port number 53, that is DNS, so that's converting names to IPs, IPs to names, name resolution, and all that kinds of stuff. Port 80 is HTTP, Hypertext Transfer Protocol, clear text web browsing. So that's normal clear text web browsing, folks. If you look at port 443, that is also web browsing, but that is HTTPS, encrypted web browsing. And then the last one, of course, 3389, that is for RDP, Remote Desktop Protocol. So that's to go and remote connect to another client machine or a server and a graphical interface. Unfortunately, by default, only one machine can be connected to one other machine unless you've got licensing involved. And if someone happens to be logged onto that machine, when you go and RDP into it, it's going to kick them off. And if they type the password in on that machine and they log back in, it's going to kick you off, and vice versa. Anyway, folks, the answer is port 21. And then the last question for this video today, guys. Question 50. Which of the following Ethernet standards uses an RJ45 connector? And you'll see there I said choose all that apply. Now, before I show you guys the possible answers here, I just want to make a note here. I am going to be making more practice question videos for you guys. Some of them will have practical questions. And some of these might only be available on my Patreon. So feel free to go check out my Patreon. Just please read the descriptions on the tiers to see if it's available or not. So if there's something available for N+, I will put it in the description. I'll say, yes, there is blah, blah, blah available for N+, or blah, blah, blah available for A+. Otherwise, you're going to be subscribing and you're not going to get what you're looking for. So please read the description. If you're not sure, you can ask in the comment section down below if there's anything for N+ on Patreon. And if there is, I will say yes. If there's not, I will say no. So I think the best way or the easiest way would be to ask in the comment section down below. Besides that little hidden phrase I gave you folks earlier. Or alternatively, you can just go onto my Discord server. That link is also in the video description. You can go on there and you can just ask me on Discord on my server. Right, so as for the answers, there they are. So once again, the question is, which of the following Ethernet standards uses RJ45? So Ethernet standards, guys, that is network cabling. But we know it's not necessarily limited to copper cable, and it's not necessarily limited to LAN cable. So looking at answer A there, 10 base T. That is also known as category 3 or just plain old Cat 3. That is telephone cable, folks. Normal telephone cable, which has got a maximum speed of 10 megabits per second. It uses an RJ11 connector, not an RJ45 connector. So answer A is not one of the answers we're looking for. Answer B, 100 base T. That is normal Cat 5 cable, guys, not Cat 5e, normal Cat 5 that transmits at a maximum speed of 100 megabits per second. And it indeed does use an RJ45 connector. So that is one of your answers. Answer C, 100 base FX. Now FX and SX, so if you look at answer C and D there, both of those are fiber. Both of them transmits at a maximum speed of 100 megabits per second. You can kind of see that in the name. Now FX uses lasers, where SX uses optical light. So the only difference between these two is FX, the distance is a little bit further. I mean, both of them goes a heck of a lot further than normal Cat 5 cable, but FX goes further than SX because FX uses a laser. It's more powerful. SX, that's the cheaper version, so it's cheaper, but it's cheaper because it uses optical light. So C and D is out because they use fiber, and fiber normally uses connectors like SC, LC, ST, you know, those kinds of ones. So it's not an RJ45. So far, the only answer here is B. That's correct. Looking at answer E, 1000 base T. Yes, folks, that is a LAN cable. That'll be something like Cat 5e, for instance. Still has a maximum distance of 100 meters, but it's transmitting at 1000 megabits per second, or should I say 1 gig per second. That is Cat 5e. Visually, the cable looks exactly the same as Cat 5. It feels the same, looks the same. The only way you would know the difference is if you look at the printing on the cable or if you go check the speed. So the reason why it's able to run faster, 10 times faster, even though it's exactly the same, is because of the frequency at which it runs. Looking at answer F there, so by the way, B and E is correct. Answer F is 10G base T. Now, folks, that is Cat6A. So it also uses RJ45 connectors. It's a normal LAN cable, but it's very, very, very fast. Cat6A, very fast. So the answers here so far is B, E, and F. All of those are LAN cables, and they all use an RJ45 connector. Looking at answer G there, 1000 base SX. That is also fiber, so we know it's going to be out. H is 1000 base LX, also fiber. So both G and H is fiber cables. They obviously transmit at 1 gigabit per second, so that's a heck of a lot better than your normal LAN cables. But it's not an RJ45 connector. So the answers here, folks, is B, E, and F. Alright folks, I hope you've learned something in this video. Maybe you have, maybe you have not. So if you've learned something, maybe put that down in the comment section down below as well. It's always nice to see what people have learned, that I'm not just wasting my time here. If you've learned something, do me a favor, give the video a like. That's the least you can do. The video is for free. And if you like what you saw here and you would like to see more of these videos, maybe you want to see when my practicals comes out, remember to subscribe, guys, otherwise you might miss it. And then lastly, folks, a shout out to all the folks that are supporting this channel. If you want to do the same, you can find that information in the video description down below. So thank you to all the Patreon supporters. There's a long list of some of the Patreon supporters. I actually have like over 400, I think, at this point in time. But most of them don't want to be on this list. So I normally ask people if they want to be on the list. And most people say, no, they don't want to be. They want to be anonymous. So unless you say you want to be on the list, I'm not going to put you on the list. So for those of you that become Patreons, if you're part of tier 1, 2, or 3, I'll ask you if you want to have your name here. And if you want, then I'll put you on the list. So thank you very much to the Patreon guys. I appreciate your support. Here's the list of the PayPal guys making donations in the background. Thank you very much, guys. I appreciate that very much. To all of those of you clicking on the thanks button below the video, if there is one available in your country, thank you very much. To those of you buying me milkshake and coffee, that link is also in the description. Thank you very much. And then lastly, guys, in case you don't remember, this channel does have a Discord server. So you'll find me in there. You'll find other IT trainers in there. Lots and lots of people that's also studying N+, amongst many other courses that are also on there. So if you want to ask questions, either myself or someone will be able to assist you there. And maybe you can assist someone else. Maybe someone asks a question that you know the answer to. Maybe you can assist that person. Either way, it's a community of like-minded people. Alright folks, so that is it for today's video. Keep your eyes peeled for some more practice questions. And remember to check out my Patreon. Alright folks, see you next time.